Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Navigation. Pick up the Phantom Beast fruit at the beginning. Chapter 61. Looking at him speechlessly, Nasha, Ain, and Binz used their own methods to deal with these idiots without taking action. A sailor with great insight handed over a bounty order and reported, "Sir Colonel, these people are members of the Flying Bull Pirates, headed by Captain Big. The bounty is 30 million. Are you kidding? There is a reward of 30 million yuan for this kind of strength." Air took the wanted notice and looked through it. The marine soldier glanced at the people lying on the ground in disgust, and explained, "The reward of 30 million is not because of his strength, but because these people commit crimes by burning, killing, looting, and so the headquarters has increased their reward." Air nodded clearly and looked at the garbage. He ordered the marines, "Kill them all and drag the bodies to the entrance of the town and hang them up." After saying that, he turned around and left. "Yes." The sailor saluted, asked someone to take photos of those with bounties, and then dragged their bodies to do the work. Air then wandered around the town and finally found an open tavern in the center of the street. After looking around for a few times, Air walked in calmly. "Welcome, I didn't expect the famous fire dragon Air to come to my shop." The boss, who looked to be 4 or 50 years old, warmly welcomed Air after he came in. Air sat at the bar, ordered a glass of whiskey, looked at the boss and asked calmly, "What a surprise." Everyone else in the town ran away when they heard Marine was coming. "But boss, you don't seem to be afraid of us at all." The boss smiled, took out a bottle of whiskey and poured it for Air, and said, "They are pirates, wanted criminals, and gangsters. Of course they will run away when they see Marine. And I am just an ordinary bar owner. Of course I am not afraid when I see you." Air took a sip of wine, smiled and said nothing. "By the way, Mr. Air, I wonder what's the matter with you coming to a small town like this where you don't care?" The boss asked casually while wiping his wine glass. "Really, you just started to inquire about information after just a few words of conversation. But it's okay to tell you. The reason I came here this time is to visit Sky Island." Sky Island. When the boss heard this word, his mouth opened wide in surprise, wondering if there was something wrong with his ears. "Are you kidding me? Sky Island is just a legend and does not exist at all." After finishing the wine in one gulp, Air put down the glass and stood up. He said with a smile, "I have told you the purpose anyway. It has nothing to do with me whether you believe it or not. By the way, remember to say hello to Doflamingo for me." After saying that, he ignored the boss's surprised look and turned around and left. After leaving the tavern, Air looked up at the sky, looked at the white clouds in the sky, and began to think silently. "By the way, the side effects of my fruit have been eliminated by the system. I should be able to fly directly over the sea of clouds and directly to Sky Island, right?" Single quote. After thinking about it, Air decided to give it a try first. He looked at Nasha beside him and ordered her, "After I leave, you continue to clean up the remaining pirates on the island, with Ain and Binz assisting you." "Yes." *3 The three of them nodded in agreement to the order. Ain looked at him and asked worriedly, "Is there any danger on Sky Island? Are you okay alone?" She didn't care whether the legend of Sky Island was true or not, but Air had said it, so Sky Island must exist. She is just afraid that there are unknown and powerful enemies on Sky Island, and Air may encounter some danger. Giving her a reassuring look, Air said comfortingly, "Don't worry, don't you know my strength yet? Except for a few monsters from New World, no one else in this sea can threaten me at all." After saying that, Air waved to them and jumped into the sky with a strong effort of his legs. After reaching a certain height on the moonwalk, Air let out a dragon roar. In Marine's admiration and in the frightened eyes of the pirates hiding in unknown corners, Air transformed into a 100-meter-long giant dragon, flapped its wings and disappeared into the sky. Air rose vertically into the sky like a rocket. The powerful physique is even more exaggerated with the addition of fruits. After only a few minutes, Air crossed the 7,000-meter White Sea and continued flying towards higher ground. 8,000 meters, 9,000 meters, 10,000 meters, boom. With a loud noise, the entire God's Island, Apayado, shook. In the palace, Enel and the 4 priests under him, who were discussing something, subconsciously opened their hard nets to sense it. The 4 priests sensed for a long time and found nothing wrong. Only Enel, who was strengthened by thunder fruit and could cover the entire Sky Island, discovered something was wrong. What is that? Some kind of large beast that can fly? He murmured in confusion. Just below Apayado, the island of gods, Air's upper body was stuck in the soil, and his lower body was struggling with his legs. After using up the strength of 9 cows and 2 tigers, Air finally pulled himself out of the ground. Bah, I flew too fast and crashed directly into Apayado. Fortunately, no one saw me, otherwise I would have been completely embarrassed. Single quote. Shaking his head and shaking off the dirt on his head, Air complained to himself, then circled the land and continued to fly upward. In Enel's perception, a huge winged creature was flying upward quickly against the ground of the island of gods. Feeling very novel, he turned into a bolt of lightning with curiosity and rushed towards the direction where Air was coming up. Stab! With a flash of lightning, Enel's figure appeared at the edge of the island of gods. He looked down at the sea of clouds below, expecting to see the appearance of this unknown creature as soon as possible. Soon, with a loud roar, a majestic and handsome behemoth covered with fiery red scales appeared in front of him. As early as the first time Enel arrived, Air sensed someone. Although I don't know who is here, but since he lives on an island with soil, he must be either Enel or one of his priests. Sure enough, Air took a closer look and saw a strange man with a white turban, bare upper body, earlobes hanging down to his chest, and a thunder drum on his back. Who else could it be but Enel, the self-proclaimed god? You are the strange creature that just crashed into the island of gods. You look very haughty. How about becoming my pet? If you don't say anything, I will treat it as your consent. Enel looked at Air and said to himself with satisfaction. But what he didn't notice was that as he finished speaking, Air's dragon face turned completely dark. You mean, you saw the way I just crashed into the ground? You still want Lousy to be your pet? Air opened his mouth and roared angrily. Hey, talk. Enel's eyes bulged, his chin hit the ground, and he shouted in disbelief. Air didn't waste any time. He twisted around and swung his more than 30-meter-long dragon tail, and whipped him hard. After finally regaining his composure, Enel looked at the giant tail hitting him, crossed his arms and said in a disdainful tone. Even if I can talk, I'm still just a beast. As a god, how could I be? Poof. Before he could finish his words, Air struck him hard with an angry blow. Enel turned into a meteor and flew hundreds of meters away while vomiting blood. Air flapped his dragon wings and fell from the sky, stomping heavily on him with a weapon-like kick. Paw kai! A crisp sound of flesh exploding reached his ears. Air raised his paw and saw a puddle of meat sauce sticking to his paw in a disgusting manner. Rubbing on the ground in disgust, Air transformed back into his human form, walked over to the pit and looked at it, and began to call the system. Hey, system, this guy is so bad, can he still absorb Thunder Fruit's abilities? Single quote. Ding, okay. Does the host want to absorb the Thunder Fruit ability? Bullshit, suck it. Single quote. Ding, start absorbing. Absorbing successfully. Fusion for host. Fusion successful. Bala. Air's body suddenly flashed with arcs of electricity, and as the system prompted that the fusion was successful, his whole body exploded with lightning. The crackling thunder continued, and Air seemed to turn into a real thunder and lightning. Looking at his hands, a strange feeling emerged from the bottom of his heart. He instinctively reached out and pointed at the big tree not far away, and shouted, 100,000 volts. With a bang, a bolt of lightning as thick as a finger flew out from the palm of his hand and struck the tree, leaving a large black hole in the tree. So handsome. Apart from anything else, the visual effect of this fruit is definitely impressive. Single quote. Air started experimenting in the forest as if he had acquired a new toy. He used the more than 7,000 experience points he had left to push Thunder Fruit to B level. It also combines the abilities of Fire Dragon Fruit and Thunder Fruit to form a new Thunder Flame Dragon mode. Just when he was getting carried away, the huge commotion he caused attracted 4 God-tier officers under Enel. Hearing the sound of electricity in the distance, the 4 people immediately accelerated in that direction. When they arrived, they did not find Enel. Instead, they saw a stranger without wings, looking at them with a smile. The most incredible thing is that the hand of the man in front of him is beating with thunder and lightning that only God can control. The 4 people suddenly felt something was wrong, but Ohm, who was bald, wearing sunglasses and holding a sword, still mustered up the courage and asked loudly, "Who are you? How dare you trespass into the island of God without permission? This is God's territory. Aren't you afraid of God's punishment?" Looking at the weird foursome in front of him, Air smiled and pointed at the pit with his thumb, teasing. "God, are you talking about the one with long ears? If you go to the pit and work hard now, you might be able to piece it together with some effort." "Asshole, you are disrespectful to God, I must kill you," Ohm said, but his eyes subconsciously looked into the pit. Because he was standing on a tree, he could clearly see the situation in the pit at a glance. Seeing the meat paste inside, he just frowned in disgust. But when he saw a tattered snare drum and bloomers that were stained red by blood but could still be roughly distinguished, he suddenly began to panic. After swallowing, Ohm turned his head blankly and glanced at the other three priests. The four of them looked at each other in horror, and secretly made up their minds through their eyes. No need to communicate, the four people immediately dispersed and ran away. There was no way, even such a powerful god was defeated by the people in front of him, let alone a few weaklings like himself. Moreover, several people had clearly seen just now that this man without wings can also control thunder and lightning, which is not too scary. In other words, from Enel to this unknown man now, the common feature between them is that they have no wings. The four of them ran away full of doubts. Could it be said that the power of God to control thunder and lightning can only be obtained by those without wings? What they don't know is that a legend is gradually spreading on the future Sky Island that people without wings can gain the power of gods. Therefore, for those Sky Island children who were born without wings, the Sky Island people not only did not have the previous disgust and rejection, but even received extra care. Of course, this is just a later story. Time returned to the present. Air ignored the four people who were escaping, but spread his wings and flew higher above the island of gods. Air, who was flying high in the sky, glanced around, and suddenly a bright light caught his attention. "Where is it?" Single quote. After flapping its wings and accelerating, Air came to the light. "Haha, I found the legendary golden bell. It's really big and scary when you look at it up close." After sighing, Air stepped forward and observed carefully. In addition to the golden gold, he discovered the historical text at first sight, but he didn't have much interest in it. He just knocked on it out of curiosity and ignored it. Instead, the words left by Pirate King Galdi Roger caught his attention. "The Pirate King has already left a message, so it's not too much for me to write something more on it." Single quote. With this in mind, Air wrote in Chinese on the side, "The truth lies, Raftel, full of bad taste. Neferutari D. Air. Words. I don't know if Robin will be confused when he sees it in the future," scratching his head and trying to figure out the meaning of these words. After thinking about that scene, Air laughed out loud. "Ahem, let's get down to business first. Hey, I won't move on the golden clock, and I won't be polite about the pillars next to it. Anyway, as long as it doesn't affect its normal ringing." Air rubbed his hands, put his hands on the gold excitedly, and activated his fruit ability. Lay metallurgy. As the electric arc flashed on his hand, except for the golden clock and the engraved wall, all the other gold decorations melted and shaped into a huge square gold brick. "This piece is enough for now. I'll pick up the remaining gold when I'm free next time." Single quote. Thinking in his heart, Air transformed into a dragon, hugged a gold brick that was almost half his size, and returned to Qinghai with fluttering wings. Not long after he left, Gan Fool, the former god of Sky Island, rode his mount, the strange Pegasus that ate the horse fruit, to the vicinity of the island of gods. After hovering in the sky for a while, Gan Foray, who was hesitating whether to go in to investigate, suddenly saw several servants of Enel escaping from the island in a panic. Gan For frowned and immediately swooped down, stopping these servants to ask about the situation on the island. Seeing that it was the appointed god, a few ordinary servants did not dare to hide anything and honestly told everything they knew. When he heard that Enel was dead and that his priests had packed up and ran away, Gonfor was also shocked. Regardless of anything else, he quickly flew into the island on Pegasus to investigate carefully. What was puzzling was that he searched around the island and couldn't find the new god without wings that the servant said. Gonfor reluctantly stopped his search. He originally wanted to have a chat with the mysterious new god to see what kind of person he was. But now the other party is nowhere to be found, and Sky Island's throne is inexplicably vacant. Now he has a headache, Enel is dead, and the new god is not here. If the Sandians, the original inhabitants of the Island of Gods, knew this news, they would definitely want to retake the island. The residents of Sky Island will definitely refuse. The two sides are expected to start another war, and no one knows how many people will bleed and die for this land. Gonfor did not want to see the outbreak of war. He was determined to let the Sandians and Sky Islanders coexist peacefully and jointly protect this homeland. Thinking of this, he urged the Pegasus on his crotch and headed towards Angel Island where Sky Islanders live. Not to mention the series of changes that occurred in Sky Island due to Air's arrival, the goal was achieved. Air, holding a large piece of gold, was free-falling at high speed towards Gaia Island below. Passing through the last cloud and mist, Air finally saw the blue sea. In the sea, Gaia Island, which is as big as a sesame seed, also appears in the eye. The dragon roars. Ouch! The extremely penetrating dragon roar spread through the air into the ears of all Marines. In the port, Marine on the warship subconsciously looked up to the sky and saw a small dot shining like a star in the sky. A Marine soldier put his hand on his forehead and looked towards the sky. He asked his companions in confusion, can you see the stars on Gaia Island during the day? The companion shrugged and walked to the ship's storage room with a box of food in his arms. Maybe. This is the Grand Line. It's not surprising to see any weird sights. Makes sense. Hai Bing agreed with his words, but he did not put down his raised hand, but continued to look at the stars in the sky. But as time went by, his expression gradually changed from the initial novelty to confusion, and then gradually turned into fear. He put down his hand, turned around and shouted to his companions on the boat, "Oh no, there is a meteor falling towards us from the sky. Hurry up and get to a safe place." Following his voice, the Marines on the ship suddenly became confused. The lookout quickly raised his telescope and looked at the meteors in the sky. When he saw Meteor's true face, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Idiot, it's Colonel Air who's back. Calm down." All the Marines were stunned and looked at the sailor who had lied about military information with murderous eyes. Then they quickly found their seats and lined up neatly in a square formation. Not long after, as a gust of wind raged, Air stopped above the warship. Air, who had seen what just happened through his eyes, glanced at these embarrassing things unhappily, and said in a deep voice, "Idiots, please spread out. Didn't you see that I was holding something?" After hearing the superior's reprimand, everyone did not dare to refute and quickly dispersed. It was at this moment that everyone looked up and saw what Air was holding in the claws of the dragon. Marines who thought they had seen the world all opened their mouths in surprise, looking at what was in front of them in disbelief. "Here, what is this? Could it be gold?" "Yes, it should be, but it should only be coated with a layer of gold on the outside, it can't be the whole thing." "Is that so? Phew, it scared me. I thought it was pure gold." "Haha, I see, it's gold-plated." The Marines discussed it for a while, and all came to the conclusion that this was just a gold-plated, scary-looking thing, but with 10 or 20 million belly, it was worthy of the sky. After hearing their speculation, Air did not explain much. It was best to misunderstand. After the news of the province spread, it attracted the attention of some thoughtful people. The remaining gold on Sky Island is already his property in Air's heart, and he will not allow others to covet it. "Why are you still standing? Why don't you go back to your post?" Air transformed back into his human form and stood on the gold bricks to scold the onlookers. Everyone was shocked and quickly dispersed. "Wait a minute," Air called out to them again, pointed to the gold bricks at his feet and ordered, "This thing is too conspicuous, go find a piece of cloth to cover it." "Yes." The sailors quickly obeyed the order and did so. Air didn't care about them. He turned on his sight color and disappeared in a flash. Gaia Island is located on the other side of Magic Valley Town. Nasha, Ain, and Binz teamed up to defeat and tie up Montblanc Kulik and his Sarusan United Army. Ain took several bounty lists and compared them. After confirming them, she waved her hand and told the sailors behind her, "Yes, bring them all to the warship and wait for Colonel Air to be released." The sailors were about to step forward when a voice interrupted them. "No need, just let these guys go." "Air." Everyone looked back and saw Air coming behind them at some point. The sailors looked at him in confusion. wondering why the colonel, who had always been merciless to pirates, suddenly showed mercy. Air ignored them and went straight to the rhombus-faced man with a chestnut on his head and said, "You are the descendant of Rolando Montblanc Kulik, right?" Kulik looked up at the person with difficulty, spit out a mouthful of blood, and said with a forced smile, "What, even Marine wants to mock me? I have no such interest. I just happened to pass by and wanted to meet him by the way." Air squatted in front of him and said nonchalantly. Kulik was tied up with ropes, struggled to sit up, and said calmly, "Then what? I don't think there is anything about me that can attract the attention of the famous fire dragon Air." Smiling, Air stood up, patted his trouser legs, looked into his eyes and said, "Well, I just want to tell you that Rolando didn't lie. The Golden Land really exists." After saying that, he put his hands in his pockets, turned around and left. Kulik's eyes widened, looking at Air's back. He quickly wanted to chase after him and stop him. But he forgot that he was still tied up. Just when he wanted to get up, his body fell down due to lack of coordination and fell back to the ground. He raised his head and shouted at Air's back, "What do you mean by this? Speak clearly." Air didn't look back, he just stretched out his hand and pointed to the sky, then waved his hand and led the people away. Kulik buried his head in the ground and couldn't help crying. His subordinates, the apes and orangutans, saw their boss in this state and quickly came forward to comfort him. "Boss, are you okay? What does this fool Marine mean? What does heaven have to do with Rolando?" Listening to the comfort from his men, Kulik turned over with a smile, looked at the sky with red eyes and shouted, "Rolando, you fool really didn't lie." Listening to the voice behind him, Air smiled. This is the romance of men. Ain, who was walking behind him, didn't hear his muttering, but asked doubtfully, "Have you finished your work? Also, why did you let those pirates go?" "Ah, the matter has been resolved. As for me, I'm just in a good mood and don't want to catch them. This is my arbitrary justice." Ain looked at his back strangely and whispered to Nasha beside him, "I went to Sky Island." Is his head broken? Why did he suddenly say something strange? Nasha also felt that Air was a little weird, and Kaido hesitated. Did he have an accident and break his head? "Hey, you two, I heard it." Air could hear the conversation clearly without any hesitation, and he wondered whether these two guys did it on purpose. "Ah, I'm sorry." Nasha apologized quickly, but Ain just snorted and pouted cutely. Without further ado, the group returned to the warship. As the warship set sail, Nasha walked up to Air with a stack of bounty orders, handed it to him and said, "Air, these are the pirates we caught during this period. What do you think of how to deal with them?" Air looked through it and found that there were quite a lot of pirates caught, as many as 13, and there was still a bounty for them. "You must know that it has only been half a day since Air and others arrived at Gaia Island. Although the highest bounty here is only 40 million, it is still an exaggeration." So he opened his mouth and said, "Those who commit crimes by burning, killing, looting, etc. will be shot directly and thrown into the sea to feed the fish. If there are any leftovers, call the nearby marine branch and ask them to pick them up." Nasha patted her white rabbit and breathed a sigh of relief. This was the Air she knew. "Well, according to my investigation, these people are all worthy of being shot. Then kill them quickly. These people are just a waste of food while they are still alive. Send them to hell to repent." Nasha nodded and left. After a while, a dozen pirates were escorted out of the prison by the Navy. With the sound of several gunshots and the sound of falling into the water, the world lost a few pieces of garbage. What followed was another boring journey. There was nothing but the sea in his field of vision, and there were no unsighted pirates running to trouble him. During this period, Newsbird delivered a newspaper. Air took a look and found that there were reports about him. This is what it says. "The marine supernova, the fire dragon Air, recently landed on Gaia Island. Colonel Air slaughtered a large number of pirates with iron-blooded methods, and his cruel methods were frightening. Reporters have reason to wonder whether Air, the fire dragon, has some unknown mental illness that prompted him to be so ruthless. I will continue to follow up on this matter, so readers are welcome to look forward to it." Single quote. Air was furious when he saw this newspaper that had made up nonsense and seriously damaged his reputation. He grabbed the newsbird and wrote all the Zuan dialect he had learned in his 2 lives on the paper, and asked the newsbird to take it back. Within 2 days, the newspaper published an article about Air threatening and intimidating reporters. However, for the sake of fairness, justice, openness and the most rigorous authenticity of news, reporters resolutely refused to be threatened by Marine and fought against the evil dragon Air for the sake of news justice. When Air saw this newspaper, he almost vomited blood in anger. This was not the first time that the Birdman Morgans had disgusted him, and Air wanted to kill him now. Because of this incident, Marshal Sengoku specially called to inquire about the situation. When he told Sengoku exactly what had happened, Sengoku could only comfort him with a few words but had no further words. As a result, Sea Kings, which passed the Air warship in the past 2 days, was in bad luck. The sailors shed tears silently in their hearts as they watched the boss turn into a dragon again and start electrocuting fish. Bala, sizzling. With a flash of electricity, a Sea Kings no smaller than a boat and countless sea fish emerged from the water with their bellies turned upside down. Looking at Air falling back on the deck, Chef Couch cautiously stepped forward and advised, "Colonel, please don't eat fish today. If you eat fish every day, your brothers will almost vomit." All the sailors nodded and looked at Air expectantly. Seeing their eyes flashing with tears, Air still didn't make up his mind and agreed to Kuchi's proposal. The sailors cheered and quickly sped away from the sea full of fish. Air lay back on the lounge chair unhappily, picked up the whiskey on the table and drank. Ain sat next to him with a glass of wine, looked at him and said helplessly, "Don't be angry, just talk to me about your thunder and lightning." Hearing Ain's question, he swallowed his breath and explained, "Well, you know, I am a phantom beast type user. It is reasonable to suddenly awaken the power of thunder and lightning." "Is that so?" "That's right. Trust me." Ain tilted her head in confusion. She didn't know much about the phantom beast. Looking at Air's sincere eyes, she reluctantly accepted this statement. Apart from the disturbing newspapers, the voyage went smoothly. Air and his party arrived at Alabasta at noon one day. He did not rush back to the G-34 branch, but found King Cobra and chatted with him about some of his ideas. This crocodile incident is a typical example. Alabasta has many unknown secrets. If we don't have strong protection, we will be targeted sooner or later. In the study, Air sat on the sofa and said seriously. Cobra tapped his fingers on the table and asked hesitantly, "Is it so serious?" Crocodile was just an accident. Alabasta is located in the first half of the Grand Line, and with a standing army of 600,000, almost no one dares to trouble us. You also said it was almost. I don't know where Crocodile got the information, and the target was the royal family's secret, Pluton. You know, this is something that even Vivi doesn't know. Even I only knew it from Crocodile. It is hard not to suspect that there is someone behind him deliberately instigating this. Quote. Air said half-truthfully. Cobra frowned upon hearing this, but still hesitated. For his own plan, Air decided to add another fire. This time when I went to the headquarters, I spoke with the 5 elders. As soon as he said this, Cobra immediately raised his head and looked at him with a serious expression, waiting for his next words. Although it seemed that the other party was just chatting with me casually and said a few words that were not serious or serious. But when it comes to the D in my name, they seem to be a different person and are very hostile to me. After a pause, Air organized the language and continued. You also know that Neferutari is the only family among the 20 kings that has not moved to the Holy Land. In their eyes, this approach is a naked betrayal. Sighing, Cobra rubbed his temples and asked tiredly. So you suspect that the government leaked the information and deliberately allowed Crocodile to harm Alabasta, hoping to use his hand to get rid of us? Well, that's what I thought. What about you? What do you want to do? Ask the government for an explanation. Or declare war? Cobra looked at him seriously, trying to see something in his eyes. Air did not hide away, but looked at him firmly. The two were in a stalemate for a while, and Air suddenly laughed out loud, and revealed his purpose under Cobra's doubtful eyes. I'm not that stupid. Declaring war with the government now will only lead to death. What we should do now is to select elite soldiers to train intensively and strengthen our own strength. Then wait for the opportunity. I believe that in the near future, the government will definitely suffer when faced with unprecedented challenges. That's our opportunity. Seeing Air talking about his plan enthusiastically, Cobra sighed silently in his heart. Do you have the qualifications of a king? Sure enough, he is unwilling to be ordinary. Single quote. The idea is great, but what about the funds? You can't cultivate talents without money. In Alabasta's case, there isn't much money in the treasury to support your plan. And how to arrange the specific training plan, who should be responsible, and how to solve these problems. Quote. Regarding these issues, Air had already made up his mind. He stood up and said to Cobra with a smile, I've already taken care of the funding issue. You can just send someone to accept it when the time comes. As for training, Air took out a small book from his pocket and put it on the desk, explaining, this is Marine's training method, and it also contains the training experience first compiled about Marine 6 styles. For training, leave it to Yaka. After all, I'm still in Marine and there are some things I can't do, so I feel relieved to have him come. Quote. As one of the 2 patron saints of Alabasta, Yaka can be said to be loyal to the royal family. Air believes that he can definitely complete this task. By the way, speaking of Yaka, there is one thing I have always wondered about. For thousands of years, Alabasta's patron saints have been jackals and falcons. But it is such a coincidence that the 2 leaders of the kingdom happen to be jackal and falcon fruit power users. Is there any connection between them? Quote. This question existed before Air traveled through time. He had never found a chance to solve this question before. Now that the time was right, he asked it casually. Hearing this question, Cobra was stunned for a moment, then shook his head in amusement and explained. This is indeed not a coincidence. In fact, these 2 fruits have been passed down with the royal family for thousands of years. Every ability user will enter the royal tomb before passing away. After they die, the fruits will be reborn on the fruits prepared in advance in the tomb. Quote. Air's face lit up, and he quickly wanted to ask, but Cobra stopped him with his hand. I know what you want to say. You want to bring other people with abilities into the tomb, kill them, and then let their fruits be reborn in Alabasta, right? Air nodded repeatedly. Yes, in this way we can quickly build an army of ability users, and the country's foundation can also be enhanced. Cobra chuckled lightly and said with a smile, didn't the successive kings of Alabasta think of such a simple truth? If it were so simple, the ruler of the world would not be the world government but the Neferutari family. Quote. Air asked confused, are there any restrictions? Nodding, Cobra said, yes, Nefertari's ancestors have tried this method before, but without exception, after the death of all ability users, their fruits were not reborn in the tomb but then appear somewhere in the world. After calming down, Cobra stood up and took out a book from the bookshelf, handed it to Air, and then said, have you heard? Devil fruit will be affected by the host and change. Air was startled and quickly took the book and read it carefully. What is recorded in the book is an old-fashioned story. I don't know how many years ago, there were 2 amazing and powerful people in the kingdom. They were the 10th generation jackal and the falcon fruit power user of the kingdom. One year, a war broke out in the kingdom, and the opponent was a coalition of several countries. Even though Alabasta had 2 strong men in charge, there were still heavy casualties. In the end, it was the 2 strong men who repelled the enemy at the cost of their own serious injuries and dying. Before they died, the 2 of them had been worried about the safety of their motherland and wanted to continue fighting for the country. But in the end they died of serious injuries. The contemporary king was very sad, and at the same time he respected the 2 men who saved the kingdom from danger, and specially allowed them to be buried in the royal tomb as a mark of respect. But who knows, at the moment when the 2 were buried in the tomb, the jackal and falcon fruits that were supposed to be reborn from humble beginnings were silently reborn on the water spring as tribute. The contemporary king attributed this to the obsession of the 2 strong men that changed the fruit, making them exist only to protect Alabasta. Therefore, the king also regarded the jackal and the falcon as the patron saint of the kingdom, which has been passed down to this day. Although there were only a few words in the book, Air was still shocked and his mouth opened wide. He never imagined that there was such a legendary story about the origin of the patron saint. You must know that in his memory, the only person who can affect the fruit is the legendary liberation fighter Yin Yang Shen Nika. Unexpectedly, these 2 ordinary fruits also had such origins, which really opened his eyes. Closing the book, Air took out a breath and said with emotion, it's really a legend, no one will believe it if I tell you this. Cobra nodded in agreement, and said in a tone of experience, yes, when I found out about this, I thought it was a joke made by an ancestor, but later I realized that it was true. So you know it, too. The plan to plunder fruits on a large scale is not feasible. Shrugging, Air said nonchalantly, "Forget it, I didn't expect this at first, just stick to the original plan. By the way, I want to borrow Belle for a while." He changed the subject so unexpectedly that Cobra didn't even react. Seeing this, Air took it as if he agreed, picked up the justice coat that was placed on the chair, and said without looking back, "Then it's settled." "What's agreed? Did I agree?" Cobra held his chin with one hand in confusion, completely unaware that Air had left. Following the direction of his knowledge, Air found Belle, who was training alone at the training ground. Regardless of his doubts, he pulled him into an empty room without anyone. "Your Highness Air, what do you want from me?" Belle asked impatiently as soon as he closed the door. After sensing for a while and confirming that there was no one nearby, Air took out a permanent pointer from the headquarters and his own phone and handed it to him, and then said, "Belle, I need your help with something." Belle took the two things, looked at the words, "Sleeping Ancient Town," on the pointer and asked curiously, "Whatever you need me to do, you can just tell me." Hearing this affirmative answer, Air felt very relieved. So he briefly told him about the bat fruit. "I don't know exactly what this fruit looks like or where it is. The only certainty is that it must be in Sleeping Ancient Town. So you have to search for it slowly after you get there. This may take several years. You have to do a good job." Prepared mind. Belle did not hesitate after hearing this and firmly accepted the appointment. "Please rest assured that no matter how much time it takes, I will find it, even if it takes a lifetime." No, that's not the case. Although I don't know where it is, I know it is related to bats. You can look for it in caves and places where bats are found. In short, everything depends on you." Belle nodded and said, "Please allow me to go back and prepare. I will set off tonight." Air patted his arm and walked out of the room first. Belle looked at the permanent pointer in his hand, remembered Air's instructions, and secretly swore in his heart that he must complete this task. Thinking about it, he carefully put his things into his clothes, walked out of the room calmly, and left the palace to get ready. Air was very relieved to leave the important task of finding the phantom species and bat fruit to Belle. If nothing else, in terms of loyalty, he is the most loyal in the entire kingdom, even compared to Ikaram and Yaka. What Air is worried about now is not that he has any evil intentions, but that he is in the new world in Sleeping Town. He is worried about whether Belle will be in danger, or whether he can find the bat fruit in Sleeping Town. Forget it, it's useless to think too much. I believe Belle can solve it. Shaking away the thoughts in his mind, Air came to the room prepared for Ain, intending to chat with her. But who knew, as soon as he opened the door, he saw Vivi and Ain looking at each other in a stalemate. Hearing the sound of the door opening, the two women turned their heads and looked at him with murderous eyes. A drop of cold sweat dripped from Air's head, and an unpleasant feeling lingered in his heart. "Well, I suddenly remembered that I have something else to do, so I'm leaving first." After saying that, he turned around and wanted to run away. "Stop, *2. The two women shouted coldly in unison, and Air stopped stiffly, turning back as if resigned to his fate, waiting for the two of them to leave. After the two women's narration, Air finally understood what happened. It turned out that Vivi knew that Air's friend was visiting and was curious to come and have a look, so she met Air. After Ain knew that the little girl in front of him was Air's sister, he happily took her and chatted with her. Originally, the two of them were having fun and chatting happily. Until Ain felt that she was his sister anyway, he told her that she was Air's girlfriend. But now Vivi quit, and the newly established sisterly friendship fell apart immediately. She was unconvinced and revealed to Air that she was Air's fiancé. Now Ain was also shocked. Didn't she say she was a younger sister? Why did she become a fiancé? Vivi eloquently explained the blood relationship between the two, which was at least 7 generations apart. She also accused Ain of interfering in their relationship as the fiancé recognized by their childhood sweetheart King Cobra. Ain was not willing to give in, so he quickly argued with her, and the two of them remained in a stalemate until Air arrived. After hearing this, Air's heart was filled with chills. He had encountered this kind of Shira field. Now he just wanted to find a place to hide. Vivi threw herself into his arms with red eyes and asked with a choked voice, "Air, you like me the most, right?" Ain hugged his chest and looked at Air coldly, waiting for his explanation. Looking at Vivi in his arms, and then at Air sitting on the bed, Air was now 2 heads tall. He gritted his teeth, held Vivi in one hand and Ain in the other, and said that famous sentence under their surprised eyes. You are both my wings, I like both of you. Vivi has a childish nature. In her heart, as long as Air likes her and doesn't leave her, it's fine. She has no idea what liking means, so she immediately beams with joy. Ain, on the other hand, did not open Air's hand, but continued to ask coldly, we are your wings. What about Nasha? I think she also has feelings for you. And Senior Hina, I remember you have a good relationship. I heard that you rescued her some time ago and brought her back to Alabasta. Could it be that she is also your wing? Air was so embarrassed that he didn't know how to answer. After thinking for a long time, he said carefully, well, it's normal to have 2 pairs of wings, don't you think so? After saying that, he quickly swore that he was absolutely sincere to her. Ain stared at him for a long time and sighed helplessly. I hope. After saying that, she kicked Air out and took Vivi to have a sisterly whisper again. Have I passed the test? Standing outside the door, looking at the closed door, Air scratched his head. I know that being a time traveler still has some benefits, otherwise my trip would have been in vain. Thinking of his future happy life, Air couldn't help but laugh out loud. Why are you still staying out? Go away. A roar came from the room, and Air rubbed his nose and left the place. It seems that we are still far from being able to truly embrace each other, Seed, so we have to keep working hard. Making up his mind, Air walked away without acknowledging his relatives. 121, 121, follow up and don't fall behind. In the marine base by the port, Air was running on the playground with his sailors. At this time, 5 days have passed since the Shira field broke out. In the past 5 days, Air and his team had done nothing except purchasing supplies and repairing ships. In the kingdom, Cobra first sent people to take away the gold brought from Sky Island. When Cobra first saw gold, he, like the sailors, thought it was gold-plated and looked scary. But when Air told him that it was a piece of pure gold, even as a king, his jaw dropped to the ground in shock. When he curiously asked about the origin of gold, Air just smiled and pointed to the sky without saying much. Cobra didn't ask further questions, he just asked people to store the gold, wait for it to be processed, and then find a way to exchange it for Bailey. With money, the rest can be easily solved. Under Cobra's order, Alabasta began to mobilize across the country, and military competitions were held intensively everywhere, and then the top contestants were sent to the capital for training. Finally, those with jackal fruit abilities will join in the unified training. Air also went to the place where they trained and had a look. Although the competition was still going on, there were only a few areas with few people to distinguish the winners and losers, and not many people came. But it can be seen that these people are top-notch in terms of mental outlook, physical appearance and muscles. Air is very satisfied with this. As long as the national competition is over and all the elites gather together and select the best from the best for special training like the Marine Elite Battalion, he believes that Alabasta will definitely give birth to a powerful army. In short, everything in the kingdom is in order, and Air has nothing to worry about. After being delayed here for so long, it's time for him to go to the G34 branch to complete his duties. After saying goodbye to Cobra and others, and making a promise to the crying Vivi to visit her at least twice a month, Air left on the warship. White Sand Island was originally an uninhabited island, but due to its key location, it could kill the pirates who had just entered the Grand Line in advance. He was selected by the headquarters to build ports and fortresses here, forming the current Marine G34 branch. As soon as Air's warship sailed into the port, a large number of sailors ran out of the base. When the wooden planks were lowered and Air and his party disembarked from the warship, the Marines lined up in 2 rows immediately saluted, showing grand etiquette. Air saw an old acquaintance as soon as he came down and waved hello to her happily. Hey, Major Hina, long time no see. Yes, his senior sister Hina was also among the welcoming crowd. Since Air went to naval headquarters, she has been resting in Alabasta until the warship is repaired. People returned to the G34 branch. Hearing Air's name, Hina turned around unhappily, motioned for them to follow and said, let's go to the conference room first. If you have anything to say, we'll talk about it later. When the officers standing beside her saw this situation, they had no choice but to look at each other helplessly, saluted Air and followed him. The group of people entered the base under the eyes of the sailors and walked into a spacious conference room. Everyone sat down in order according to their military rank, and Ain, Nasha, and Binz were no exception. Air directly sat on the main seat, glanced at the officers sitting neatly on both sides, and introduced himself first. I am Colonel Air of the Naval Headquarters. Under the orders of the headquarters, I serve as. I am the base director of the G-34 branch. Please give me your advice in the future. Quote. After speaking, he looked at Hina and continued, Major Hina, please introduce your colleagues to me. Yes. Hina stood up, looked at the man beside her and introduced Air. This is Major Cheeks, an experienced veteran who has been in Marine for many years. Cheeks stood up, saluted Air solemnly and then sat down again. Hina introduced another person. This is. After the introduction, Air basically got to know the leadership within the base. In addition to the people brought by Air, there are currently 4 majors in the entire base, including Hina. Kemp, Scullen. The rest are lieutenant-level officers, a total of 14 people, including Ain and others, there are 17 people. Together, these people are the leadership of the entire base. They are responsible for managing all aspects of the base. There are some things that Air does not need to worry about at all. He only needs to be responsible for catching pirates. After the introduction, Air chatted with them for a while to deepen their feelings, and then let everyone disperse. Only he and acquaintances such as Hina and Nasha survived. Leaning back on the chair, crossing his legs, Air said jokingly towards Hina, It seems that we are very destined, Major Hina. Hina smoked a cigarette without any fluctuation in her expression, and said calmly, Congratulations, Colonel Air, I didn't expect you to be promoted again so quickly and become the base commander of the G-34 branch. Haha, it's just good luck. I didn't expect Marshal Sengoku to arrange it like this. But it turned out to be the Marshal's order, so I will definitely complete the mission of the headquarters, plus there is a major. With your help, I believe there will be peace in the waters under the jurisdiction of G-34. Quote. TCH, you are still so annoying, Hina is not happy. Air wanted to tease her, but when Ain glared at her, he had no choice but to keep his mouth shut. Ain sat next to Hina, held her hand and said happily, Senior Hina, I haven't seen you for a long time. I never thought we could work together. Ain, long time no see, you look beautiful again. With a slight smile on her face, Hina happily chatted with Ain, and Nasha also came over to join their conversation. For a moment, the 2 men in the room were ignored and ignored. Air, who couldn't wipe his mouth, sighed helplessly and walked to the window alone to look at the busy sailors below. A new journey has begun, and I want to start building my legend. Single quote. Since he became the base commander, a large warship in the G-34 branch automatically became Air's new ship. Large warships are a level higher than the original warships in terms of the number of people they can carry and their speed. So Air left the port with Hina, Ain, Nasha and more than 300 sailors, and began patrolling the nearby waters. Binz was left behind. Hina was not happy at first, but Air promised that he would fully guide her in hockey's practice, so she nodded and agreed. In this way, Air, surrounded by 3 beauties, began his happy time. Calm down, feel the air around you, and look for my breath. In the training room, Air guided with a wooden stick. Hina's eyes were covered with thick cloth, her head was covered with sweat and she was breathing heavily. Snapped. Another stick was slapped firmly on her butt. Hina finally couldn't help it and roared. Don't hit Hina. Are you here to teach me, or are you here to take advantage of me? Air held the stick in his left hand and slapped the palm of his hand, Japan said seriously. The key to the color of knowledge is to be calm. You need to eliminate all distractions around you and empty your mind. You must know that the color of knowledge cannot be used when you are emotionally excited and lose your calmness. I am training your mental endurance. After these high-sounding words, Hina couldn't find a reason to refute even though she was angry, so she had to readjust her breathing and continue training under Air's stick. Ain and Nasha secretly opened the door and saw clearly what was going on inside. They gritted their teeth and closed the door, muttering viciously in their hearts. It's normal for Air to be angry. After all, she is someone's girlfriend. She will definitely be unhappy when she sees Air hooking up with others openly. But Nasha is different. She is jealous because of Air's partiality, and having a one-on-one special pap with Hina. Nasha has always admired the strong. Ever since she met Air and saw his unimaginable strength, a seed was quietly planted in her heart. As time went by, her admiration for Air became more and more, and even slowly turned into love. Just when she was thinking about how to express her feelings to Air, she suddenly found that there were more and more women around Air. First there was Vivi. She was okay, just a little brat who clung to her brother and didn't understand anything. But Ain, who joined later, was different. The two were not only classmates who had been together for many years, but they had a deep relationship. Nasha was also keenly aware of the inadvertent intimate behavior between the two. This discovery made her feel uneasy and kept her awake for a long time. But before she could think of a solution, Hina joined in again. Now, Nasha couldn't sit still anymore and decided to find a time to directly express her feelings to Air. Regardless of whether he agreed or not, she would get her wish. Unfortunately, before she could find a chance, a hurried shout interrupted her plan. Pirates found. Everyone, get ready. Following this sound, the sailors on the warship immediately started to move, and each found their posts to wait for the commander's order. Nasha abandoned her distracting thoughts and immediately came to the bow of the ship, took the telescope and looked towards the sea. Sure enough, a ship flying a pirate flag appeared in sight. The other party seemed to have discovered them, and instead of running away, they turned the ship's bow and sailed straight towards this side. Air and Hina also heard the noise, stopped training and came out. Arriving at the bow of the ship, before he could ask, Nasha handed him the binoculars and said, "It's the Scythe pirates who just entered the Grand Line from North Blue. Captain Shinigami Barrack has a bounty of 50 million Baileys." Air didn't care how much the opponent had posted. He hadn't made a move for a long time and immediately asked the sailors to speed up and let the opponent pass. The two ships were approaching, but the pirates on the opposite side had no idea of the seriousness of the matter. They didn't even fire their guns, but rushed over with high morale and planned to engage in a boarding battle. Air followed their wishes and jumped directly onto the other side's deck after the two sides were less than 50 meters away. He caught the one who looked the most imposing and gave him a hard hammer, leaving the pirates on the ship dumbfounded. But there was no time to surprise them now. Hina, Ain, and Nasha led the Marines to attack aggressively and suppress them all at once. The confrontation ended quickly. Air put down the shabby sandbag in his hand with a relieved look on his face and walked towards Ain and his party. "How is it? What are our casualties?" Hina looked at him coldly and said calmly, "Except for a dozen people who were slightly injured, everyone else is fine." Nasha also added from the side, "The other party's captain and cadres were all stopped by us, and the remaining dozens of pirates are no match for the soldiers." After speaking, she glanced at Hina angrily, protesting that she was taking the job that her adjutant reported to. "Wait, you mean captain?" Air looked at the pig head behind him, pointed at him and asked doubtfully, "Isn't this guy the captain?" Hina sneered and did not answer, while Ain and Nasha looked at him with confused expressions. Finally, Nasha explained in a low voice, "He is a cadre on the ship. If I remember correctly, it seems that there is a reward of 8 million for the chef." Air scratched his head in embarrassment and said sheepishly, "It's the chef. I'm sorry that this guy is so weak. He fainted after being punched by me." After explaining, Air looked at Hina and said with a serious expression, "Major Hina, you just laughed at the commander with a very bad attitude. I will train you more strictly when you return to the ship." Hina ignored him, lit a cigarette, walked around him, and followed the sailors to search for loot. Looking at her back, Air raised his eyebrows and secretly decided that he must spread her ass today. Hina walked into the cabin and looked at the layout inside. Except that the captain's cabin was particularly luxurious, the rest was similar to that of ordinary ships. The sailors were rummaging through the boxes, especially the group of people who had followed Air from the beginning. Seeing that they wanted to remove even the wooden boards for inspection, Hina left in boredom. Walking deeper, he finally stopped in front of a door labeled storage room. For some reason, I opened the door and walked in. I opened a few wooden barrels and found that they were filled with fresh water and grain. Just when Hina felt bored and wanted to turn around and leave, a bag opened to reveal several unknown fruits caught her attention. Hina walked over curiously, picked up a piece of fruit, looked at it for a few times, and took a bite. Then her eyes widened and she looked shocked. This is of course not because the fruit is too delicious, but after she picked up the fruit, a mysterious fruit that looked like an apple but had dense patterns on the outside was revealed in the bag. This is a devil fruit. Hina suppressed her surprise and returned to the deck with devil fruit. On the deck, the three of Air were still chatting without a word. The three of them were shocked when they saw Hina coming back, especially when they saw the devil fruit in her hand. Hina casually put the devil fruit into Air's hand and said calmly, "I found it in the storage room. It was mixed with ordinary fruits and was not discovered by the pirates." Air nodded blankly, then reacted suddenly and quickly greeted the three of them back to the warship. Air came to his room immediately, opened the desk drawer and took out a devil fruit illustrated book. This was a book he copied from Cobra some time ago. He thought it would be a reference when he encountered devil fruit in the future, but he didn't expect to use it so quickly. Comparing the pictures in the book, Air flipped through page after page and suddenly stopped on a certain page. After careful comparison, he was finally sure. He said excitedly to the three people who were looking at him, "It's the soft fruit of Paramesha." "Soft fruit? Can it make objects soft?" Ain asked doubtfully. Shaking his head, Air explained, "Although its name is soft, its ability is more than that. It allows the user to change the hardness of the objects it touches, including itself, and make it soft or hard at will." As he said this, Air suddenly had the idea of keeping it for himself. Among other things, the ability to harden himself was simply a man's dream. Thinking of this, Air looked at the fruit with intense eyes. Hina, the oldest and most mature, looked at him as if she had guessed what he was thinking. She snatched the soft fruit, looked at Air with disdain and mocked, "Don't think about it, you have already eaten the devil fruit, give this one to someone else." Air's expression was stagnant and he didn't say anything stupid about how he could still eat. I had to reluctantly look away from the fruit. "If you can't eat it, then who will give this fruit to you?" After thinking for a while, Air suddenly looked up at Nasha. "Nasha will be my wife sooner or later. If she eats it, doesn't it mean that I have eaten it? There's nothing wrong with her." After thinking about it, Air put his hands on her shoulders and said in a sincere tone, "Nasha, this fruit is handed over to you. Your strength is the lowest among us, and this fruit can just make up for your strength, insufficient." Her body trembled, and Nasha looked at Air in surprise, as if she couldn't believe what she heard. "Give it to me. She was incoherent and didn't know how to speak. Hina didn't speak, but silently handed the fruit to her. Ain also came to her side and stroked her back to encourage her. Scanning her eyes from the faces of the three people one by one, Nasha finally couldn't help but shed tears from the corners of her eyes, and excitedly threw herself into Air's arms. "Thank you all. Ain, idiot, let go of your hands." Hina. Obviously Hina found the fruit. After the fun, Nasha finally took the fruit and took a bite. The three of them did not remind her when they saw this, but smiled at her reaction. Sure enough, like all other ability users, Nasha's expression changed the moment she took the first bite of the fruit. Holding back her nausea and painfully swallowing the pulp, Nasha took a few quick breaths, and then waited expectantly for her own changes. A few minutes later, Air looked at his hard fingers, his eyes glowed with gold, and his eyes at Nasha became a little more intense. Rolling her eyes at Air in annoyance, Hina said seriously to Nasha, "Although you have eaten the fruit, you still need to continue to develop it. At the same time, your physical skills must not fall behind. From today on, I will guide you in training, until you master Marine 6 styles." "Yes, Hina instructor." In the following period, Hina and Ain followed Air in the morning to learn 2-color hockey. In the afternoon, the two taught Nasha how to learn 6 postures. In addition to training, Air's main focus is on catching pirates and guiding the training of Alabasta's elite royal army from a distance. Time flies by quietly with the full exercise every day, and 3 years have passed in the blink of an eye. 3 years later, somewhere in the New World, accompanied by constant gunfire, a pirate ship fled with difficulty in the sea. "What's wrong, Captain? The marine fools are catching up with us again, we can't use too much force." "Captain, it's bad, the bilge was hit by a cannonball, and the ship started to take in water." "Captain, the wind direction has changed. We are now facing the wind, and the ship's speed has dropped." Captain. One bad news after another continued to reach his ears, and the captain of the pirate ship finally couldn't stand it anymore. Beric hacked one of his chattering men to death, walked to the bow of the ship, raised his blood-stained sword and shouted angrily. You guys, lousy as the bloody knife. Beric with a bounty of 180 million, and the enemy is just a young marine rear admiral. Keep your spirits up. The crew members looked at me and I looked at you. They all lowered their heads and did not dare to speech. Looking at these useless guys, Beric became furious, pointed a knife at the navigator on the boat, and ordered in a cold voice, turn around, lousy, or lousy will chop you to death first. The navigator's feet softened and he almost fell to his knees. He wanted to try to persuade Beric, but as soon as he saw his bloodthirsty eyes, he was so frightened that he didn't dare to say a word, so he had to be honest. Really command the ship to turn around and kill the warships in the rear. On the warship, the lookout watched the pirate ship suddenly turn around and turned around to report to a young man lying on a deck chair. Air Rear Admiral, the opponent has turned around and is approaching us at full speed. Air lifted his blindfold, looked at the darkening sky and said weakly, then let's take the opportunity to deal with them. I'm tired of chasing them for a long time. The sailor saluted and turned to convey the commander's order. After yawning and stretching, Air stood up and walked onto the bow. 3 years later, Air is still wearing a white suit with a white shirt underneath, looking simple and capable. It's just that his height has increased from a little over 1.7 meters 3 years ago to over 2.3 meters now. He already looks like a little giant. As soon as he stood up, Marine, a beautiful woman with white short-sleeved shorts and thighs wrapped in flesh, handed him a towel. Air took the towel and wiped his face, smiled and said to her, Nasha, you are still so considerate. Nasha smiled back, put her hands behind her back, and happily Kaido said, this is what I should do, I am your adjutant. As soon as the words left his mouth, Rishu's sweet voice interrupted the conversation between the two. I didn't hear that the adjutant still has this responsibility. It should be my girlfriend who does the job of wiping my face and washing my face. Nasha turned her head angrily and looked in the direction of the sound. I saw Ain, who was wearing the same black shorts and black stockings as her, standing behind them, folding his arms and looking dissatisfied. Holding her, she opened her legs and walked to the other side of Air with the clatter of high heels. She challenged Nasha. Miss Adjutant, let me, as your girlfriend, do this kind of work in the future. What nonsense are you talking about? Of course the adjutant has to take care of all aspects of the officer's duties in life. This is my responsibility, and I am also Air's girlfriend. Are you kidding me? I've never heard that an adjutant has to take care of this. You just made it up. As for your girlfriend, as long as I don't admit it, you will never be one. I protest. It's not your decision whether you have a girlfriend or not. No, I am the eldest sister in the family, so of course I have the final say. Who can say it? I don't admit it. So the two of them started quarreling in Air's ears, talking to each other. Not wanting to get into trouble, Air had to sneak away quietly and stay away from the two quarreling women. After hiding away, Air looked at the two people who were still arguing and sighed silently. Originally, after Nasha ate the devil fruit, she expressed her feelings to Air. Ain finally accepted her and expressed his willingness to share with her. But ever since Hina silently mentioned which of the two was the eldest sister in the family, the two began to argue. Both are 21 years old this year, and Nasha is a few months older than Ain, so according to her, she is her sister. Ain, on the other hand, believes that he should be the one to establish a relationship with Air first. Of course Nasha didn't agree, so she moved Vivi out, saying that she was the one who confirmed the relationship with Air first, and she immediately became his fiancé in one step. Ain was choked and unable to refute, so she took the second sister's position again. The two started arguing again. In the end, it was Vivi who, as the eldest sister, established the status of Ain's second sister without knowing what means Ain used. There is nothing Nasha can do if she doesn't agree. Before Hina is confirmed to be Air's girlfriend, the minority obeys the majority and she can only become the third child. But she was still unconvinced and argued with Ain all day long. Finally, Ain got angry and joined forces with Vivi to expel Nasha as his girlfriend. Then, the conflict between the two became even greater. The three of them never asked Air for his opinion, leaving Air helpless now. Just when he was leaning against the wall with a headache, Hina appeared next to him, put a cigarette into his mouth, took one in her mouth, and raised her chin to signal Air to light it. After Air used his power to light the cigarettes for the two of them, Hina leaned next to him and joked, "You are so popular. They have to quarrel over you a dozen times every day." He rolled his eyes at her angrily. After all, wasn't she the one who initiated this matter? By the way, Hina is really not a social girl. Both of them cater to his preferences and wear shorts and stockings. She was still wearing the same burgundy long trousers, wrapping herself tightly. "Okay, stop talking and find a way to help me persuade them." Hina raised her eyebrows, looked at him playfully, smiled and said, "This is your private matter, I have no reason to persuade them." Hina refused. After taking a deep breath of cigarette and throwing away the cigarette butt, Air looked at Hina sincerely and said, "You have more experience and strength than the two of them, and your character is also stable. In my opinion, you are their eldest sister, so I leave this task to you." Hearing these words of confession, Hina's cheeks blushed slightly but quickly returned to normal. "The pirates are coming, let's deal with them first." After saying that, she avoided Air's sight and walked around him. At the moment when the two people's bodies were intertwined, a word came to Air's ears. "But since it is your request, I reluctantly agreed." As soon as the words came out, the two people standing back to back slightly raised the corners of their mouths. On the pirate ship, the stunned Shingbalik could not have imagined that at this time, they were frightened and prepared to die and planned to fight hard. On the marine warship opposite, a bloody fight for husbands was still going on, and they did not pay attention to them at all. Looking at the warship getting closer and closer, and thinking that the lookout hand saw someone who was exactly the same as the one in the newspaper, Barrick's heart gradually became anxious. Swallowing, he cursed viciously. "What a bullshit marine rising star, what a bullshit fire dragon. Lousy just borrowed your head to become famous in the world." After encouraging themselves, the two sides tacitly stopped the bombardment when they were 200 meters away. After the two ships got a little closer, Barrick and his men launched the attack first. 577. Barrick took his deputy captain Jason, who had a bounty of 90 million, and slashed two flying slashes with his sword at the same time. The snipers in the pirate group also aimed at the sailors and started sniping. The Marines did not show weakness. The two swordsmen, Ain and Nasha, also responded with slashes. Hina appeared in front of the Marines and knocked away all the bullets that were coming from several directions. The pirates looked at the three people who took action, and they immediately named the three people. They are the subordinates of the Fire Dragon, the Dark Prison Hina, Time Ain and the Man's Nightmare Nasha. Many pirates were frightened upon hearing these names. In the past few years, Air has been catching pirates everywhere and has become famous. At the same time, information about several of his women has also been reported incidentally. Morgans also named each of them based on their abilities, making their names known to more people. When it comes to this, Nasha has something to say. The other two women's names are normal, but when it comes to her, it becomes weird. This is interesting to say. Air was not around at the time, and the three women were on a mission together. When they encountered a pirate group, although the three of them teamed up to defeat them, they still let the captain of the pirate group run away. Unexpectedly, within a few days, the captain actually ran into the G-34 base and voluntarily surrendered. After asking later, everyone found out that Nasha used her fruit power to soften him during the battle. Although he gradually recovered, he didn't know why his little brother was always weak and unresponsive. After trying many methods to no avail, the captain lost all hope and went directly to the base to surrender. I don't know how this matter was found out by the reporter, and it spread all over the world with the newspaper. All the men tensed up after reading this report, and their hearts were filled with fear when they looked at Nasha's smiling face in the newspaper. At this point, the title, Man's Nightmare, spread. Hee, Nasha, your reputation is good for you. The pirates across the way were so frightened that they didn't dare to come over when they heard about you. Ain covered his mouth and joked angrily. Nasha's face turned red. No matter how many times she heard this name, she felt ashamed and wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Shut up, you fools, go to hell. Along with the words, she wielded Changdong and slashed a 10-meter long slash, which was enough to show how angry she was. Ain also showed no sign of weakness, and struck at the opponent with continuous and rapid slashes like rain. Hina directly raised his hands and fired dozens of iron spears, piercing the opponent's ship with holes. Beric and the vice captain managed to block the two women's slashes, but were unable to deal with Hina's iron spear. A small cadre just wanted to stop one of the iron guns, but he didn't stop it for even a second. The iron gun plunged deep into the cabin with him. Beric cursed secretly. All his men were trash, and the probability of survival would be even lower if this continued. But now there is no way out, we can only fight hard. Young ones, come with me and rush up to fight with them. Beric jumped on the warship immediately, and Vice Captain Jason also followed closely and slashed at Nasha with his knife. When Hina's armed kick blocked Jason's attack, she turned her back to the two women and said calmly, "You hold Beric, and he will help you after I deal with it." Needless to say, Ain and Nasha were already fighting with Beric. The three of them are all swordsmen. Although Beric's strength is not weak, he can't get away from the two women who are ability users. Hina looked at Jason, who had a calm face and maintained a fighting posture with a knife in both hands, took a deep breath of cigarette, and took the lead in launching the attack. Shave. The red figure came to Jason in an instant and whipped his waist with a whip kick. Jason reacted quickly, dodged with a side step, and then quickly struck Hina with two slashes. Hina waved her hand and conjured an iron rod to easily scatter the slash. The two looked at each other, a strong fighting spirit rising in both of them. Whoa! The two disappeared at the same time, fighting fiercely together again. Perceiving the battle between the three women with his own eyes, Air was very relieved and did not intervene. After 3 years of special training by him, the strength of the three women was no longer what it used to be. At this time, the two ships finally collided with each other. The pirates waved their weapons, howled and fought with the sailors. "Oh, I can't be idle either. Let's clean up the soldiers and get some results." Single quote. 100 million volts razor. Air pressed his palms on the deck, and thunder and lightning as thick as his fingers spread forward in a network like small snakes. Cooperating with his accurate sight and color, he assisted the little snake to bypass Haishion with wisdom and accurately hit the pirates. Zarazla. As the sound of electricity passed by, except for a few who looked like cadres who were left by Air to practice with his subordinates, the other pirates all twitched and fell to the ground not knowing whether they were alive or dead. The few cadres who were lucky enough to still be standing looked at their fallen comrades beside them and felt that their legs were weak, and a cold air from head to toe made them shiver. Air passed through the circle of marine soldiers, looked at several pirates and pointed their thumbs behind them and said, "In a one-on-one duel with my subordinates, whoever can win the market in a row, I will let him go." A pirate looked around, swallowed his saliva and said softly, "Can you guarantee it?" Air glanced at him, summoned a bolt of lightning and chopped him into charcoal, and said coldly to the remaining pirates who huddled in fear, "Believe it or not, it's up to you. If you don't want to, just die. Never mind." None of the pirates dared to hesitate, so they quickly nodded and agreed. In this way, a dozen low-level officers under Air picked their opponents and fought with them with a grin. Air just held his chest and watched the battle from the sidelines. From time to time he would tell the surrounding sailors some of the key points of the battle or the shortcomings of the officers during the battle. Unlike Air, who was holding a leisurely duel competition, Beric on the other side was very uncomfortable. Because he knew the abilities of Ain and Nasha in advance, he was always timid in fighting and did not dare to have physical contact with them. With a knife, he parried left and right, fled up and down, and the fight was very embarrassing. Clang! He fought with Ain again, and when faced with Nasha's kick, he quickly jumped back. But as soon as Beric's legs landed on the ground, he realized something was wrong. The deck under my feet was as soft as plasticine, and my whole body sank uncontrollably as soon as I landed. Taking advantage of the moment when he was unstable and lost his center of gravity, the two women stepped forward together and patted him with a purple and yellow light on their hands. In desperation, Beric jumped out using a technique similar to moonwalk, dodged Ain's ability, and blocked Nashish's palm with his knife. After several violent steps away from the two women and reaching high altitude, Beric let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the soft, paper-like saber in his hand, Beric threw it away helplessly. Now that I don't even have any weapons, it's even more uncomfortable to face these two women with disgusting abilities. Barrick considered the situation on both sides and decided to run away immediately. Just when he was about to escape, a series of sound breaking through the air came towards him. Barrick, who was unarmed but had good knowledge of sight, easily escaped the enemy's sneak attack. He glanced in the direction of the attack and saw that his vice-captain was tied into a rice dumpling from head to toe with iron hoops, and Hina was stepping on him and looking at him quietly. Seeing this, Barrick strengthened his decision to escape, decisively ignored his men, let go of Yazzie and ran for his life. Unfortunately, just as he was stunned for a moment, Ain and Nasha also chased after him on the moonwalk. The sword light flashed, and more than a dozen slashes were struck, blocking the space for him to jump out of the window. He twisted around in embarrassment to avoid all the slashes. Barrick took a closer look and saw that the three women had formed a triangle and surrounded him. Knowing that he could not escape, Barrick clenched his fists and roared before launching the final charge. With the sound of heavy objects falling to the ground, Hina threw Barrick, who was also tied into a rice dumpling, onto the deck. Air looked at the two rice dumplings and several pirate cadres who had been beaten into pig heads with satisfaction, praised the three women for a few words, and then returned to the room alone. After closing the door and lying on the bed, Air fell into deep thought. 3 more years later, I was transferred to New World after being promoted from Commodore to Rear Admiral 2 years ago. His subordinate Hina was also promoted to Colonel, and Ain and Nasha also made rapid progress and became major officers. As for the G-34 branch that was originally managed by him, it was temporarily handed over to the headquarters by Shishi, who was formerly a major and was now promoted to lieutenant colonel. But Binzi knew that his strength was not enough, and he voluntarily stayed there for his goddess. From the first half of the Grand Line to the New World, facing pirates whose strength and bounty have increased significantly, Air's strength has improved even more rapidly. Due to the large-scale arrest of pirates and his ruthless killing style towards pirates, Air was therefore dubbed Blood Dragon, Butcher Air. Especially after he wiped out a combined pirate fleet with a total bounty of over 4 billion, his reputation became known to more people. By the way, I should have been promoted to Vice Admiral long ago based on my achievements. Why is that old man Sengoku still here? Don't give yourself a promotion. Forget it, look at my panel. Quote. As soon as the thought came to mind, the system jumped out consciously. Ding. Nefertari D. Air. Gender. Male. Age. 16. Personal abilities. Physique SSS 124,874 1 millionths. Swordsmanship SS 22,320 250 thousandths. Physical skills SS 59,621 250 thousandths. Hockey. Armament Hockey SS 75,114 250 thousandths. Observation Hockey SS 94,181 250 thousandths. Conquerors Hockey SSS 54,484 1 millionths. Skills and moves. Shave S, Moonwalk S, Tempest Kick S, Finger Pistol S, Iron Body B, Paper Arts A. The number of words is a little small. Devil Fruit. Dragon Fruit SSS 200,914 1 millionths. Thunder Fruit SS 40,201 250 thousandths. Experience points 67,000. Fusion Fruits 2. Overall evaluation. SSS 4 Emperor's level. Looking at this gorgeous panel, you can think of how much effort Air has put in the past 3 years. At the beginning, he led his men to directly block the entrance to the upside-down mountain, and settled down directly at Twin Capes to arrest pirates indiscriminately from all over the world. For a time, it became so famous that, except for a few stupid young men, no other pirates dared to come over. Seeing that there was no gain, Air had no choice but to take people back to the base to continue patrolling. But before long, he couldn't help but cause trouble again, leading his men around the world to carry out cross-regional arrests. This made the bases of other branches full of resentment, and finally jointly reported to the marshal, accusing him of ignoring the regulations and leaving his duty without permission. Sengoku took a look and thought, you are capable of causing trouble, you like to catch pirates, right? Come on, I'll give you a promotion, and you can go play in the New World. In this way, he bid farewell to the lovely subordinates of the G-34 branch, bid farewell to Cobra, Vivi and other family members, and came to the New World. The result made Sengoku dumbfounded. Instead of taking the special passage reserved for Red Line's world government-affiliated agencies, Air dived 10,000 meters to the Fishmen Island. Block here and capture all the pirates who want to go to the New World or go back to the first half. They even successfully eliminated some human traffickers who wanted to catch fishermen, gaining the favor of the residents of the Fishmen Island. It's a pity that his move touched the interests of some high-level people in the world government and was resisted by them. In addition, Air accidentally captured a certain pirate group who had just joined Whitebeard's command. In 2.3, Whitebeard issued a kill order. At that time, he was not strong enough and had to leave reluctantly. When leaving, many mermaid ladies and fishmen came to say goodbye warmly, which made Air almost lose control and chose to stay here. After leaving the Fishmen Island and officially entering the New World, Air was not idle either. He went to Shanks' territory today and captured a group of pirates under Big Mom's banner tomorrow. In addition, Kaido, who was already interested in him and sent people to recruit him, Air has offended the 4 emperors 10 times. Time returned to the present. Air closed the panel, thinking about the purpose of coming to this sea area this time. One day, he was sent to Sleeping Gur and suddenly contacted him. After searching for the fruit he dreamed of, he finally found it. However, Bell seemed to be being watched. He knew that Air had come to the New World, so he contacted him, hoping to teach Air the fruit as soon as possible. Upon hearing the good news, Air quickly changed his flight and rushed towards Sleeping Ancient Town. Thinking about it, Air suddenly felt something and took out a piece of paper from his pocket. This was Bell's life card. At this time, a spark lit up in the corner of the life card, and as time passed, the life card gradually shrank. This is an abnormality caused by Bell being injured and his vitality decreasing. There are still 3 days before I sleep in the ancient town. Bell, you must hold on. Cough cough cough. No, the task entrusted to me by His Highness Air has not been completed. I cannot die here like this. Single quote. Near Sleeping Ancient Town, in a dark cave, Bell was vomiting blood and had more than a dozen wounds on his body. He was sitting down in a corner and hiding in a corner, panting and weak. Although he was bruised, his hands held a small wooden box tightly and refused to let go. On the other side of the cave where Bell was hiding, a group of fierce-looking men armed with weapons were searching for traces of him. The leader of this group, a thin man with 2 muskets across his waist, looked at one of his men and asked coldly, "Are you sure he has a treasure on him?" Hearing what the boss said, the sly-eyed subordinate nodded repeatedly. "Kaido, Captain, I swear, I saw with my own eyes that there was a devil fruit in his box." The men came out of the tavern last night and happened to see Bell carefully carrying the box containing the fruit into a remote hotel. As a user with Zone's mouse fruit ability, he turned into a big mouse and followed him out of curiosity, and then happened to see Bell opening the box to check the situation. In order to prevent accidents, his subordinates found the captain of their pirate group and reported their gains. After listening to his men's stories, the captain led his men to surround Bell's room overnight. Fortunately, Bell noticed it and activated his fruit power to turn into a hawk and fly out of the window. What I didn't expect was that the captain was also a sniper who could sense the situation. He fired several shots at Bell in the night sky through his perception. Although Bell escaped the bullets aimed at his vitals, he was still seriously injured. Coupled with the salvos fired by others, he had more than a dozen bullet holes in his body. Bell gritted his teeth and rushed out of the pirate captain's range of perception, escaping to a cave on another part of the island and hiding. The furious pirate captain organized people to search the entire island overnight. Several more men came to report, and the captain waved them impatiently to continue the search. He found a stone and sat down to rest. This fool is really good at hiding. Lousy can't even find him with all his knowledge. I cursed and cursed for a while as if to vent my anger, but then I thought about the beautiful image of eating the devil fruit, becoming stronger, and dominating the new world. He mustered up his energy again, stood up with a slap on his thigh, and continued his search. The island where Sleeping Ancient Town is located is not too big. Under the pirate captain's knowledgeable search, they found the cave where Bell was hiding in only one day. After repeatedly confirming that there was only one exit in the cave, the captain and several of his confidants slowly entered. Click. The sound of something being crushed was particularly harsh in the empty cave. Even though his body was still very weak, Bell still stood up alertly, drew his knife and made a fighting posture. Idiot, how many times have I told you to be careful? Sensing that the other party had discovered him and others, the captain no longer hid, and while scolding his men, he approached Bell carelessly. Thanks to the power of the falcon fruit, Bell can clearly see the opponent's situation in the dark cave. Looking at the 4 people walking towards him, Bell knew that he was doomed. Sorry, Your Highness Heir, it seems that my mission cannot be completed. Single quote. He grasped the sword with a firm gaze, and instantly transformed into a human animal form, planning to engage in a final life and death fight with the opponent. Just when the war between the two sides was about to break out, a big war was about to begin. With a loud bang, the entire cave shook violently. What's going on? Is there an earthquake? No, what is this? The pirate captain leaned against the wall of the cave and sensed the situation outside. When he swept past a huge creature, he screamed in disbelief. The men didn't know why. Looking at the frightened captain, they couldn't help but have an ominous premonition in their hearts. No, spare me, quote exclamation mark quote. Suddenly, screams came from outside the cave, as well as the heart-rending shouts of a group of pirates. Several people in the cave looked pale. They didn't know what was happening outside and didn't dare to go out to check. Only Bell seemed to have guessed something, and couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief and smiled. As the screams gradually decreased and disappeared, a steady sound of footsteps came from the entrance of the cave. The captain's legs were trembling, and he had guessed the identity of the visitor as he sensed everything with his sense of sight. The legendary Phantom Beast fruit power user can transform into a fire dragon that covers the sky and the sun. He shows no mercy to the pirates and slaughters them all brutally. It's unmistakable, it's the blood dragon Heir. As the words fell, a handsome young man holding a fireball appeared in everyone's eyes. After seeing the person coming, Bell was completely relieved and sat down on the ground. Ding ling dang kang. There was a sound of weapons falling, and the pirates shed tears and knelt on the ground in fear, kowtowing and begging for mercy. Lord Heir, please let us go, we are forced. No, don't kill me. I will never be a pirate again. Please let me go. Let me go, I still have a wife and children to take care of, please don't kill me. After observing that Bell's paper of life was about to burn out, Heir made a prompt decision and turned into a dragon alone and rushed over. At this time, Heir ignored several people's cries and begged for mercy. Instead, he looked at the pirate captain and asked calmly, "Who do you want to contact?" Hearing his voice, several people couldn't help but turn their heads and look at the captain. The captain was seen frozen on the spot, holding a phone bug quietly in his hand, and it seemed that he had already made a call. Chapter 71. New World, inside Dressrosa Palace. Baloo baloo baloo. A man wearing sunglasses and a pink coat rang. "Young master, your phone number." Baby 5, a member of the Don Quixote family wearing a maid outfit, held a phone and said to the man sitting on the sofa. "Foo, could you please come over?" The man, Doflamingo, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, said with a stern smile. "Since it is the young master's need, I will definitely complete it." Hearing that he was needed, Baby 5 immediately ran to Doflamingo's side with the phone bug in hand. Reaching out to pick up the phone, Doflamingo smiled and asked, "Who is it?" There was no immediate response from the other side, but a young voice said, "Take it." After that, the other party responded. "Are you young master? I am Thomas. Please save me. I met the blood dragon Heir when I was collecting devil fruit for you." When Doflamingo heard someone from the other side announcing his home address, he didn't know who it was. But after hearing Heir's name, he couldn't help but frown, but then relaxed. Foo, is he the kid from Neferutari's family? Hey, he is by your side. Give him the phone bug. The pirate captain in the cave heard the young master's order, stood up tremblingly, held the phone bug in both hands and handed it over. When he heard the title young master and that iconic laugh, Heir guessed who was on the other side. "Since he is interested in you, have a good chat with him." Taking the phone bug, Heir said, "Hey, Don Quixote's family, what do you want from me?" Hearing Heir's name, Doflamingo smiled even more wildly. Foo, kid, I've been paying attention to you for a long time. I like your character very much. What do you think? Do you want to join me? Let's do something great together. Quote, Air raised his eyebrows, not expecting Doflamingo to recruit him, and decisively refused. Forget it, I'm not interested in the big things you talk about. Well, that's really a pity. In this case, just let my lovely subordinates go. You know, I didn't do anything that violated the government's laws. Marine is not qualified to arrest Shichibukai's subordinates. Wow, Air whistled and mocked mercilessly. I didn't expect you to say such shameless words in a serious manner. You are truly worthy of it, Doflamingo. Then he ignored the gloomy look on the phone bug's face and continued to speak. Who do you think you are, still a high-ranking celestial dragons? Don't forget that you are just a wild dog that was kicked out of your home. Lousy will not listen to your orders. Shichibukai, it's not like I haven't killed Lousy before. You idiot wants me to let him go. You. After scolding, Air hung up the phone with a snap. Under the stunned eyes of the pirates, Air took a long breath and said happily. It's refreshing. Brother Ming, this shameless thing, insists on talking to me, isn't he coming to scold me? After venting, Air looked at the pirates, showed a kind smile and asked, is there anything else you want to say? I won't have the chance later. While Air was massaging the pirate's muscles and bones, Doflamingo looked at the hung-up phone bug, his anger rising like crazy. Doflamingo covered his face, the veins on his forehead popped out, and with anger, a terrifying conqueror swept around, attracting the attention of the rest of the family. Suddenly, he started laughing nervously, and said loudly with a ferocious expression. Fufufu, Neferutari D. Air, don't be too arrogant. A traitor with AD in his name will sooner or later be liquidated by the government. I will wait patiently for this moment to come. Fufufu. Baby 5, who heard the conversation between the two, hid far away, looking at the angry young master and not daring to speak. On the other side, after Air dealt with the pirates, he quickly carried Belle and went to the town to find a doctor for treatment. After the operation, after repeatedly confirming that Belle was fine and out of danger, Air found an unoccupied room and took out the fruit. Looking at this palm-sized fruit with an ordinary appearance and purple mysterious patterns, Air swallowed hard. Eat it and I will have eternal life. Taking a deep breath, under the temptation of eternal life, Air opened his mouth and bit it. Ignoring the disgusting taste, Air quickly swallowed the pulp and then quietly felt the changes in his body. The experienced Air quickly became familiar with the new ability, and a pair of sharp fangs grew under his control. The room also fell into darkness, and I couldn't see my fingers. After experiencing it for a while, this fruit gave Air the feeling that it is good for money and it has no other useful effects except immortality. First of all, its physical increase is not as big as that of the fire dragon fruit. Secondly, it has no other special abilities. It can only turn off the lights and make the vision dark, which is useless to the knowledgeable and powerful. Of course, this may also be because Air has not developed the fruit enough. Maybe after leveling up, he will be able to discover other unknown abilities. Quickly summoning the system, Air spent 46,600 experience points in one breath to stack the bat fruit vampire form to S level. Closing his eyes, Air carefully understood the power of the vampire fruit, and then opened it suddenly. Sure enough, this fruit is not simple, it is exactly what I expected. Vampire fruit. Since they are all vampires, what is the most well-known ability of vampires? Vampire. Transform into a bat. Look handsome. No, the most important ability of a vampire is the first embrace. It is the ability to transform other people into compatriots. This is the ability that Air desires most. When he was playing games in his previous life, the abilities displayed by the Red Earl, Valoric Redfield were mediocre. Apart from being able to become younger, there was almost nothing outstanding about him. Of course, the Red Earl has just eaten the fruit, and it is normal for it to be at this level without development. But just as it is, many people have more speculations about vampire fruit. Among them, there is one guess that Air finds very credible. That is, the vampire fruit allows people with abilities to embrace others for the first time and transform ordinary people into vampires. As the fruit level reaches S, it means that the vampire fruit has reached the level of awakening. Air also confirmed this conjecture. According to his feeling, as long as he wants to, he can turn others into the same kind. Newly born vampires are not afraid of sunlight or silverware. Their only weaknesses are seawater and seafloor cloth, the nemesis of those with abilities. But in the face of a strong physique, sensitive senses and absolute loyalty to oneself, this is nothing. Then there is the price you have to pay when you first get air. The price is also very simple. It takes 10 years to convert one into one. It may seem harsh, but it's nothing to air. Just find a pirate to steal their lifespan, and there is basically no consumption. Thinking of the image of himself commanding thousands of vampires in the future, oh no, it should be an army of noble vampires, Air trembled with excitement. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Air walked out of the room. He closed his eyes and opened his eyes. The SS level plus Thunder Fruit bonus easily covered the entire island. Filtering out ordinary conversations and various noisy sounds, he accurately targeted a certain pirate group that seemed to be holding a banquet. The corner of Air's mouth curled up, and with a flash of lightning, CEAA, his figure disappeared in the hospital. On the coast, the unknown pirates who had just escaped the pursuit of Marine and came to the island were holding a lively banquet to celebrate their escape from death. Gurgling, burping, one of them drank a big gulp of fine wine, burped, put his arms around his companion's shoulders, blushed and shouted loudly. What Marine, what Rear Admiral, haven't we escaped? First think Marine is just like this. With the captain here, I will see who can catch us. The companion he was holding pushed him away with a look of disgust on his face, fanned the air that contained the other's bad breath with his hand, and said disdainfully. Now let's start bragging. When we met Marine before, who hid in the room and was so scared that he didn't dare to come out. As his voice fell, there was a burst of laughter from the crowd. Listening to the ridicule of his companions, he slammed his wine glass on the ground in embarrassment, stood up crookedly, pointed at the crowd and retorted loudly. Lousy just happens to be unwell, otherwise what the hell Marine, come and kill one Lousy. After he finished speaking, the pirates did not refute, but opened their eyes wide in horror and pointed their fingers tremblingly behind him. What are you doing? Are you frightened by Lousy's momentum? The drunken man asked in confusion, not yet understanding the situation. At this time, a hand was placed on his shoulder, and a strange voice came from the same time. Really, since you are so powerful, I can't let you go. The pirate gangster turned his head in confusion. Ah, who are you? Before he finished speaking, the moment he saw the face of the visitor clearly, he immediately turned to stone. Air looked at the drunkard in front of him and smiled kindly at him, and the hand on his shoulder lit up red. Before anyone could react, he quickly aged, his skin became shriveled, his hair lost its luster and turned from black to white, and even his teeth became loose. Of course, the kind-hearted Air did not let him continue to live in this world in this body. Instead, he directly absorbed all his vitality and sent him to the paradise. The scene in front of them scared the pirates enough. It was already scary enough when they saw the legendary Butcher Air, but now they saw this weird scene. Many pirates were so frightened that their eyes rolled over and they fainted. Past only has a lifespan of 35 years. I didn't expect this unlucky thing to be short-lived. It's really unlucky. Unhappily, he threw the shriveled corpse aside. Looking at the garbage, Air opened his hands and black mist filled his body. Little bats were summoned by him from the mist, and they clung to the pirates' bodies with precision, biting into their exposed skin. Following the bursts of screams, the pirates began to wither and age like the previous minions, until their vitality was completely absorbed and they died completely. After the target died, the little bats reunited and flew back into the mist. Feeling the surge of vitality in his body, Air opened his hands and laughed like a villain. Ha ha ha, I have gained a lifespan of more than 2,000 years in one fell swoop. Celestial dragons, Amu, just wait for me, I will pull you down one by one. By the time Air returned to the ward, Belle had already woken up. Seeing his arrival, Belle struggled to get up and asked anxiously. Your Highness, where is the fruit? Where is it? Don't worry, I've already taken care of the fruit. You haven't recovered from your injuries yet, so take a good rest first. Air comforted him and helped him lie back on the bed. Looking at Belle, who was still caring about the mission even though he was seriously injured, Air suddenly asked. Do you want to see the power of that fruit? Belle was stunned for a moment, first a little confused, then turned into surprise, looking at him in disbelief. Your Majesty, are you? Yes, that fruit was prepared for me, and I have already eaten it. It is also a rare phantom beast species with magical power. How about it? Do you want to try it? Try it. Belle didn't know what Air's words meant, but he nodded obediently. And he also wanted to see what was so special about this fruit that he had been looking for 3 years. The moment he nodded, the ward was suddenly shrouded in darkness. After a second, the darkness subsided and there was light again in the room. Belle looked at the image of Air in vampire form with wings on his back, blood-red eyes, and 2 fangs. He thought for a while and asked hesitantly, "Is this a vampire?" Air nodded, then shook his head. "Vampire sounds so ugly, I still like to call myself a vampire." Bloodlines. After muttering a few words, Belle no longer cared about the issue of address, but asked about abilities expectantly. Hearing this question, Air raised the corner of his mouth and said, "You'll know if you try it." After saying that, without waiting for his reaction, Air leaned over and bit his neck. Belle was startled at first, then his neck felt a slight tingling, and then a strange energy quickly poured into his body along Air's teeth. Air let go of his mouth and stood aside to carefully observe his changes. Bang 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 tilde operator. Belle's eyes were blank, and his heart was beating dully, and it was beating faster and faster. After reaching a certain critical point, he suddenly let out a roar. With a hiss, 2 big holes opened in the hospital gown he was wearing, and a pair of wide bat wings sprouted from his back. About 10 minutes later, Belle's consciousness returned. He subconsciously wanted to reach out to support his head, but he saw long and sharp nails on his hands. He sat up suddenly and looked at his hands in surprise. At this time, he felt something strange behind him again, and when he turned around, he saw a pair of strange wings that were different from the falcon form appearing behind him. Thinking of something, he couldn't help but lick his teeth with his tongue. Sure enough, he felt that he had 2 extra pairs of fangs, upper and lower. He looked at Air in disbelief. He had too many questions about the changes in himself. "Your Highness, what's wrong with me? I'm obviously a person with falcon ability, how could I become like this?" Touching his body, Belle asked anxiously. "This is my new ability, how do you feel?" Belle touched his body, and suddenly he was stunned. He reacted suddenly, pulled off the bandage on his body, looked at the wound that had healed as before, and shouted in shock. "It's healed. Even as a zone user, I wouldn't have been able to recover within 10 days, but now I'm completely healed. Accelerate healing. I have to write this down too," Air muttered, pulling the confused Belle up from the bed. Let's go outside and test your new form." After saying that, Air took Belle, who was in vampire form, and left the hospital with the doctor's confused look full of questions, and came to an uninhabited open space on the edge of the island. After 2 hours of testing, Air had a clearer understanding of the strength of his dependents. First of all, Belle's strength, physical strength, perception, and recovery speed have been greatly improved. According to his own judgment, the increase is about 8 to 10 times. Then there are the same 3 forms as the general zone, namely human form, the previous human animal form, and the animal form that can transform into a big bat. 0. Finally, Air also captured a gangster in the town for him to suck blood from. Belle didn't resist, opened his big mouth with fangs and bit into it. But after taking a few mouthfuls of blood, Air found that there were no special changes in him. Belle opened his mouth and thought for a while, then under Air's confused gaze, he used sharp nails to make a 20-centimeter long wound on his chest. After the blood flowed out, he bit the gangster again and began to suck blood. Then, Air watched in shock as his wound healed quickly. In less than a minute, the wound of more than 20 centimeters on his chest had healed as before. But the equivalent price is that the gangster dies completely and his vitality is sucked dry. But neither of them had much reaction to this. Belle felt his powerful hands, looked at Air with admiration, and said excitedly, "Your Highness. This is simply a miracle. With this power, I believe that Alabasta will definitely be more brilliant under your leadership." Air was very satisfied with Belle's changes. After spending another 2 days helping Belle get familiar with his abilities, Hina and his team finally arrived. Seeing the 3 girls, Air was about to share his joy with them, but was interrupted by Hina's next words. Air rolled his eyes angrily. Hina took out a phone bug from her pocket and said to him. Every time he ran so fast, without a phone bug, Marshal Sengoku's phone calls almost went crazy. Hina was very angry. Why is the marshal so anxious to see me? Air took the phone call in confusion and asked strangely. Ask yourself. Seeing that Hina didn't want to talk to him, Air, 987, had no choice but to call Sengoku boringly. As soon as the call was connected, Marshal Sengoku's roar came from the other end of the phone. Air, where are you? Have you forgotten what I told you before? Get back here. Holding the phone bug far away, after Sengoku finished speaking, Air carefully approached and asked. Don't be angry, Marshal. I'm on my way to the headquarters now. Well, as for what you told me, does it mean that I'm going to be promoted to Vice Admiral? Sengoku on the other end of the phone was almost driven crazy when he heard what he said. He smashed the table in front of him with his fist and roared. If you don't arrive at the headquarters within 3 days, you can go to the recruiting camp and work as a soldier. Snapped. After saying that, the phone was hung up forcefully. Air looked at the phone bug in his hand with a confused look on his face, and looked at the 3 women for help. Hina took a deep breath from her cigarette, looked at this idiot and said helplessly, World Summit, have you forgotten? The marshal told you a month ago, asking you to return to the headquarters as soon as possible and there will be a task assigned to you. Having said this, Air suddenly thought about it, as if there was such a thing. Since the quadrennial World Summit is about to begin, the headquarters needs a large number of manpower to escort the king, guard the leader's territory, and increase the intensity of patrols in the empty 4 seas and the front section of the Grand Line. Now that the time for World Summit is approaching, the kings have already set off. This guy Air is still wandering around outside, so of course Sengoku is angry. Air, who had completely remembered, didn't say much, and quickly took Bell with him to climb the warship and rush towards the headquarters at full speed. Fortunately, Suigu town is not far from the headquarters, and we can directly cross the Red Line through the government's special passage and enter the first half. When boarding the Red Line, Air could clearly feel the tension here. Although the kings have not yet arrived, there are more than 3 times the number of patrolling soldiers than before, and even Air was interrogated when it precessed above. After getting off the other end of the Red Line, boarding a new ship and continuing towards the headquarters, Air called the 3 women to his room. In the room, the 3 women sat in rows and opened their mouths wide as they watched Air transform into a new form. Nasha took the lead and couldn't help but ask, Air, aren't you a fire dragon fruit user? Why can you still turn into, a devil? Looking at Nasha who was struggling to call herself a devil, Air knocked her head angrily and corrected. What kind of devil? I'm obviously a vampire, more accurately a vampire. Blood clan. The 3 of them were even more confused. Hina crossed her legs, crossed her arms, and said as if it was true. That's another devil fruit ability, right? Quote. After saying that, she ignored the surprised expressions of Ain and Nasha and continued. I noticed before that according to you, you ate the fire dragon fruit, a species of phantom beast. I also looked through your devil fruit illustrated book, it didn't even mention that users with fire dragon fruit abilities can control thunder and lightning. I didn't pay much attention to it at first, thinking it was because the picture book records weren't detailed or for other reasons. But now it seems that you probably gained the power of thunder and lightning by eating other fruits. Quote. After saying this, the 3 women looked at him with fiery eyes, waiting for his answer. Air wiped the cold sweat from his head and said, You were really sharp. He praised her dryly and frankly confessed his abilities to the 3 of them, confirming her guess. Even though Hina was mentally prepared, she was still surprised when she heard Air's personal admission, and felt that her worldview had been impacted. Looking at the 3 women who were numbed by the shock, Air coughed quickly, brought the 3 women's attention back, and talked about his purpose. We'll talk about this later. I called you here today because I have something to discuss with you. With that said, Air told them all about the vampire fruit's abilities, as well as the situation of 2.1 Bell. After hearing this, the 3 women all changed their expressions, and their eyes shone brightly. In their ears, any powerful power, like Zone's transformation or super speed, are secondary. The only thing that attracts them is eternal life. Restoration of youth. What does this mean? This means eternal youth, ageless appearance. Not to mention Nasha and Ain, even Hina, who has always been calm, couldn't stand this temptation, and was annoyed that she wasn't the one who ate this fruit. Looking at the 3 distressed women speechlessly, Air said silently, Actually, I can share my lifespan and youth with you. Upon hearing this, the three women's eyes immediately lit up and looked at him expectantly. But at this time Hina calmed down, and she suddenly asked Air, you said the person you embraced for the first time will be absolutely loyal to you, right? That's right. Air nodded and admitted, then stared closely into Hina's eyes, patiently waiting for her next words. Nasha and Ain also felt the change in the atmosphere, and Ratong became quiet. Lighting the cigarette, Hina took a deep breath and blew out a smoke ring. Embrace me for the first time and let me become your dependent. Her eyes were firm and she spoke her mind. Since you told us your secret, we have to keep it for you. Let's start with me, after all, Hina is my sister. After listening to her words, Nasha and Ain didn't care that she called herself sister, and asked Air to embrace them for the first time. Looking at the firm eyes of the three women, Air said nothing, leaned over and bit Hina's snow-white neck. Aha, Hina hummed, then reacted, her cheeks blushed and she closed her eyes, putting aside distracting thoughts and feeling the changes in her body. Air hugged Ain and Nasha for the first time in turn. With two sweet calls, the two girls also began to transform. 10 minutes later, looking at the three women in front of him, Air fell into deep thought. Cute, small wings, little tiger teeth that are not intimidating at all, plus big red Kazilan eyes, except for the iconic love tail, it is simply a living succubus. Is this a vampire? Who would believe it? Air roared crazily in his heart, but his body became inexplicably excited. 1. The three women looked at their new looks through the mirror and were very satisfied with themselves. Compare Air's ugly wings, exaggeratedly long nails and fangs. They think they look better in their own way. Air, who was despised by the three, showed a malicious smile and kept the three women in the name of checking their bodies. 3 days later, Air and his party finally arrived at Marineford. Air, who had thick dark circles under his eyes, was greeted by the sailors of his headquarters and walked on the way to the marshal's office. Air yawned and became extremely angry when he thought about what he had experienced in the past 3 days. That day, when Air hugged Ain and wanted to do something bad, Nasha's palm with the soft fruit power pressed on his body. Then Air was forced to calm down and experience the feeling of a soft man for 3 days. Up to this point, Nasha and Ain still didn't let him go. They often came over to tease him when they had nothing to do, which made him angry but had nowhere to vent, and he almost suffered internal injuries. Fortunately, the headquarters finally arrived, Nasha unlocked her ability, and Air regained her glory. Air, who had regained his true self as a man, immediately grabbed the two goblins, pushed them on his legs, and gave them a good spanking before venting some of his anger. Without anyone to guide him, Air came to the door of the office with ease, knocked on the door twice casually, walked straight in, and sat down on the sofa. Under Sengoku's cannibalistic gaze, Air unknowingly picked up a piece of fruit, leaned on the sofa, and said vaguely, "Marshal, I'm back." Snapped. Sengoku slammed the table, stood up, pointed at him and rebuked angrily, "Air. Look at the good things you have done. Provoking redheads, arresting Big Mom's guests and ruining her tea party, publicly calling the celestial dragons, stupid pigs, in the newspaper. You still ignored my orders and just returned to headquarters now. You asterisk asterisk asterisk." Sengoku cursed for more than 10 minutes without even breathing. Air has seen this kind of scene many times in the past 3 years. He smiled shamelessly and explained seriously. That's what Morgan said when he provoked the redhead. I just walked around his territory and didn't do anything. As for my aunt, every time she holds a tea party, many pirates and underground forces are invited to go there. I just grabbed a few of them. As for the celestial dragons, I'm telling the truth, most of them are horribly stupid. Quote. Looking at Air talking eloquently, Sengoku felt that one was as big as the other. This fool is like this every time. No matter what you say, he has a reason to refute it. The key thing is that although most of the things he did were reckless, they did win Marine a lot of good reputation. Even if he occasionally disobeyed orders and was warned by himself, this kid would always reflect on his face and turn around and treat his words as farts. Because of his attitude, he and the top government officials have been suppressing him and refusing to promote him. But this guy's achievements are much more real. With the intensity of hunting down pirates, except for Akainu, I guess no one in the whole headquarters can match him. Rubbing his eyebrows helplessly, Sengoku interrupted his chatter and got to the point. Well, after discussions between the headquarters and the world government, the butcher appointed you as Marine Yuan to open the headquarters vice admiral. When he heard that he had been promoted to vice admiral, Air was slightly startled, but he didn't pay much attention to it. Instead, he bargained with a smile. Marshal, you might as well give me the title of alternate admiral to save you trouble in the future. Sengoku couldn't bear it anymore, picked up a document on the table and threw it at him, while roaring angrily. Take the documents and get out immediately. Don't let me see you again without my order. Air took the file with a smile, waved to Sengoku, turned and left the office. After closing the door, Air walked back and opened the file in his hand under the admiring gazes of Heisei around him. During the World Summit, guard the first half of the Grand Line with the Flying Squirrel and Ghost Spider to ensure that the participating countries will not be attacked by pirates. Ah, what kind of idiot mission is this? Asterisk 2. Looking at the contents of the document, Air couldn't help but complain, but besides him, another voice also sounded in his ears. Only then did Air react with hindsight, and turned around to look behind him. Hey, Air kid, long time no see. Garp, wearing a dog head hat, greeted Air with a smile. Seeing Garp's old face, Air stopped and looked at him with one hand on his chin, showing a malicious smile. Hey, Vice Admiral Garp, you are finally back from East Blue. I just heard that the Marshal was looking for you, please go and have a look. When Garp saw his smile, he knew that this brat had no good intentions. He had clearly heard Sengoku getting angry just now, so he went over there just to scold him. He hooked Air's neck and forcibly led him to his office, and at the same time said, We'll talk about Sengoku later. I brought some good tea from East Blue and we'll try it together. Seeing that he had not fooled the old man, Air curled his lips in boredom and simply followed him and left. 10 minutes later, Air took a sip of hot tea, put down the cup and looked at Garp, who was also enjoying the tea leisurely, and said relaxedly, Old man Garp, can you be so leisurely? Marshal Sengoku is still waiting for you to report. Impolite brat. After muttering, Garp calmly took a sip of tea before continuing. Let him go, I don't want to worry about World Summit. After drinking tea, I will go directly back to the G3 branch. Only you, a willful old man, dare to do this. Muttering secretly in his mind, Air crossed his legs and took out a reward notice from his arms, and said with a smile. How about going to East Blue this time? Your lovely grandson Ace has become a pirate. What Air holds in his hand is Ace's bounty order. This guy was targeted by Marine not long after he went to sea. Moreover, he had already eaten the Mara Mara fruit at that time, and the first reward was an astonishing 200 million belly. After Air saw his reward order, he put it away just to make Garp angry when he saw him. But the old man Garp actually took a sip of tea calmly and then said, Oh, and it was over. Air can't fix this. This is completely different from what he expected. Glancing at him sideways, Garp snorted in his heart, You want to see my joke, but you're still far behind, kid. Hey, old man, don't you have anything to say? Ace went to sea and became a pirate. So what, even if he becomes a pirate, he is still my lovely grandson. And I know him very well, and he will not do anything evil to harm civilians. Quote. After saying that, he laughed and put down the cup, took Ace's reward order and showed it off to Air. As expected of my grandson, this is my first time offering such a high reward, ha ha ha. Air snorted in displeasure, but did not refute. For people like Ace and Luffy, rather than calling them pirates, it would be more appropriate to call them adventurers. I hope you can laugh when Luffy goes to sea. Garp was suddenly choked and speechless. He stood up angrily, pointed at Air and said, I specifically asked you to teach them and guide them onto the right path. As a result, now Ace has gone to sea to become a pirate, and Luffy is still talking about stupid things about becoming the Pirate King. How on earth did you teach them? Nani, they are your grandchildren. You didn't teach them well, but you still have the nerve to put the responsibility on me. Faced with the old man's shameless blame shifting, Air refused to agree and quickly retorted. Also, if you want them to become Marines, why don't you bring them back to the headquarters? Under the fist of Mr. Zephyr, what a bullshit Pirate King, they won't dare to say such stupid things for a week. That's my grandson, how can I let Zephyr teach me a lesson? Then don't put the blame on me. I don't care, you must give an explanation. I am 66666, that is. The two argued for a long time, but Air really couldn't do anything about this scoundrel, so he finally nodded and agreed that he would catch him when Luffy went to sea in the future. After hearing his promise, Garp stopped pestering him and waved his hand to let him leave quickly. Seeing him throw it away after using it, Air felt so angry that he simply took all the tea leaves and snacks on his table into his arms and ran away in a hurry. After running out of the bad old man Garp's office, Air first went to Zephyr's place. Ain and Hina are also here, and the four masters and apprentices who have not seen each other for a long time are chatting happily. Since the last incident with Wabel, the headquarters has become more attentive to every outing of the elite camp for internships. Whenever we go out, the headquarters will try our best to arrange for a free vice admiral or 2 or 3 rear admirals to act together to ensure the safety of Marine's future mainstay. After staying with Zephyr all morning, the 4 of them had lunch together, and then Air said goodbye to the teacher. Before leaving, Air suddenly opened his hand and gave Zephyr a hug. Zephyr patted his back inexplicably, and then pushed him away. Are you still a kid? Get out of here, I don't want to see it. Your turn. Quote. Regarding Zephyr's duplicity, Air smiled and waved goodbye to him. In the process of hugging him just now, Air secretly passed on 50 years of life force to him. This force will not directly make him young again, but will stay in his body and slowly nourish his youth. Body. Or it may suddenly break out when he encounters a strong enemy, allowing him to have peak strength in a short period of time. But this is also temporary, and it will return to its original appearance after the short-term peak passes. Bye, Teacher Zephyr, please take care of yourself. I hope you will still be so energetic when I see you next time. After saying that, Air and the 3 left. Zephyr looked at the backs of the 3 disciples and was very pleased. This was the new generation of Marine he wanted, and it was also the motivation for his hard work for many years. Returning to the warship, Nasha, who was staying on the ship, immediately came over to greet her. Air, what mission has Marshal Sengoku given you? What else could it be? Patrolling. The kings went to the meeting with their elite guards, and a large number of marine troops also went to guard the Holy Land. Now Sihai and the first half of the Grand Line are short of manpower, which requires us to guard our home and ensure the safety of the franchised countries. Quote. Air said a lot and suddenly sighed. Alas, every time the marshal calls me, he calls me back from all the way. Then he scolded him with a shameless face, threw a troublesome task at random, and started to chase people away. It was as if I was always available to 537 and could be a tool for him to vent his anger. Hearing Air complain, Nasha and the 2 girls behind him looked at him with disdain. Isn't it all your fault? After complaining for a while, Air directly called his subordinate Yongfan and planned to leave this sad place. Just as the warship left the port and had sailed a certain distance, an officer suddenly ran to the shore and shouted at them. Air Vice Admiral, please wait. Air on the boat heard the sound and walked to the stern of the boat curiously to look at the person coming. When the officer saw Air, who was wearing a white suit at the stern and stood out in both appearance and temperament, he quickly raised the gorgeous-looking katana in his hand and shouted. Air Vice Admiral, this is the black sword with 21 skills prepared by Marshal Sengoku for you. Please keep it. After saying that, the officer threw the long knife out with all his strength. Air stood on the bow of the ship and jumped lightly, holding the knife firmly in his hand. The scabbard is silver white, the sword guard is made of pure gold and is shaped like petals, and the handle is inlaid with a ruby. Hold the handle of the knife and carefully pull the blade out of the scabbard. The blade length is 114 cm, with a wide straight blade, heavy flower dice, and a sweeping hat. The blade is pitch black and the edge is white with a cold light. Air hung the new saber on his waist with satisfaction and shouted loudly to the officers on the shore. Thank you Marshal Sengoku for me. I like this knife very much. The officer did not reply, but stood at attention and saluted as the ship went away, until it disappeared from sight. Although he obtained a new weapon, what happened in the next few days made Air really unhappy. Not to mention being harassed by flying squirrels and others every day, discussing the distribution of sea areas and strategic deployment. They also need to remotely command the sea areas they are responsible for, coordinate personnel adjustments, and material preparations. This series of things can really upset Air. Fortunately, after communication, the scope of my mission was determined to be in the waters near Alabasta. In addition, Vivi did not attend the meeting with Cobra this time, which gave Air time to go back and see her. So they hurried slowly. After spending half a month, Air and his team finally arrived at the sea area he was on duty. Being a good leader, he took a walk around the area, handed over the command to Hina, and grabbed Belle and flew back to Alabasta. Today, Alabasta is prosperous. With the blood transfusion of Sky Island gold, vigorous afforestation and water conservancy projects have begun across the country. During the past 3 years, Air also accidentally encountered the small Sky Island, which is where Nami was in Visalia for the past 2 years. After paying the meteorologists a large sum of money, they happily customized a small rain cloud for Alabasta. As long as the rope is magically held on the ground, the rain clouds thousands of meters high will be pulled forward. With it, Alabasta has never had a drought again. In the evening, after quietly returning to the palace, Air and Belle separated and found Vivi reading in the room. Coming behind her, Air covered her eyes and said in a choked voice, "Guess who I am?" Vivi, who was suddenly attacked, was a little panicked, but when she heard the strange sound, she immediately guessed the person coming. Air. She stood up and jumped directly into Air's arms. She raised her head and looked at him with tears in her eyes, and said happily, "Air, you are finally back. Can you stay for 2 more days this time?" Vivi, who is 14 years old this year, is already 165 centimeters tall, but she is still far behind Air. You hugged her and spun her around in circles. After hearing her laughter, you spoke. "Sorry Vivi, I still have a mission, but it's near Alabasta and I can come back to see you often." Hee. Vivi smiled slyly, pulled Air to sit on the bed, and then said, "I originally thought you would come back to escort Dad to the World Summit, but Brother Bin said you were still in New World. I was just thinking that you would be sent to the first half of the patrol, so I didn't go with my father. Unexpectedly, I guessed it right." Quote, "My Vivi is still so smart, you have guessed this." Air did not hesitate to praise, rubbing her little head and praising her. Vivi showed a charming smile, her little red face arched in his arms. Then he took Air and talked endlessly about Alabasta's current situation and interesting trivia these days. Air listened quietly and made 2 sentences from time to time. The two just cuddled together and talked for several hours. When Vivi had finished speaking, Air suddenly stared into her eyes and said in a magnetic voice, "Close your eyes, I have a gift for you." Vivi was immediately at a loss. Looking at Air's handsome face, she thought of many things. But in the end, she closed her eyes obediently, clenched the hem of her clothes with her hands, and waited for Air's next move. Looking at her pouted little mouth, Air felt funny. In Vivi's nervous and expectant mood, he leaned over and stretched out his fangs to gently bite the snow-white neck. Yeah, feeling the hot breath on her neck, Vivi opened her eyes in surprise, her pupils trembling. "Isn't this too fast? I'm not ready yet, but if it's Air, I can do it." Just when her thoughts were flying wildly, she was planning to take the next step according to the method introduced in the book. Her whole body suddenly stiffened, and a strange energy surged into her heart, spreading to every corner of her body with every beat of her heart. Finally, at a certain moment, energy traveled throughout her body, and she began to undergo some unknown changes. After a while, a new succubus with wings on its back like the 3 girls of Ain, a new vampire was born. A few minutes later, Vivi fluttered her wings like decorations and flew happily around the room. The first wonderful experience of truly flying by herself soon made her lost in it. Air looked at her funny and didn't stop her, letting her play as much as she wanted. It wasn't until she was tired from flying that Air hugged her and lay on the bed to fall asleep together. The next day, warm sunlight shone into the house through the window. Air opened his bloodshot eyes and stood up from the bed, looking at Vivi, who was still smiling sweetly in her sleep and couldn't help but sigh. She will be an adult in 2 years, and her development is already very good. In addition, she likes to hold herself when sleeping, and she also likes to move around. If he hadn't reminded himself repeatedly that this little girl was not yet an adult and he could not be a copper smelter, Air almost couldn't bear it last night. Air sighed helplessly, pinched her little face, and started to get up and get dressed. When he finished washing, Vivi also woke up. After calling the maid outside to help her dress up, Air came to the restaurant alone. At this time, Ikarim, Yaka, who were left in the country to protect Vivi, and Belle, who returned yesterday, have been waiting for a long time. Seeing Air and the others bowing respectfully to him, Ikarim pulled out a chair for him. After Air sat down at the main seat and extended his hand to invite them to sit down together, the three of them took their seats. After taking a bite of the delicious dishes made by Ikarim's wife, Air asked, "How is Alabasta doing this year?" Ikarim coughed a few times and sang a few lines before Kaido. Under His Highness's policies, Alabasta's tax revenue has increased significantly this year. Coupled with some state-owned industries, the revenue in the first half of the year alone was 3.7 billion belly. Speaking of this, the three people in Ikarim all showed bright smiles. For them, there is nothing happier than Alabasta becoming more prosperous. Air is also very satisfied. The stronger Alabasta becomes, the more beneficial it is to him. After learning about the economy, he asked Yaka about the military that concerned him most. Yaka nodded and introduced the kingdom's most elite troops to Air and Belle, who had not been back for a year. In the past 3 years, we have selected more than 15,000 elite soldiers from the National Army and conducted rigorous training according to the methods provided by His Highness. Finally, the best 100 people were selected to form the Royal Special Operations Force. Among them, the weakest person has mastered 1 move and 6 moves, and the most talented one has even learned all 6 moves, making him no match for me. Although the army composed of such a group of people cannot be compared with the naval headquarters, compared with other countries, it can be regarded as an invincible army. When Yaka talked about such a unit, he couldn't hold back the joy on his face. He was obviously very satisfied with them. Even Air was a little surprised when he heard that someone could completely master the 6 postures. Considering that not everyone in Marine knows it, but there are so many masters of the 6 styles, Air is still a little dissatisfied. He suppressed the eagerness in his heart and continued to listen to the 2 men talking about the current situation of the kingdom. With Air's intervention, Alabasta has now greatly improved in terms of finance, military, environment, medical care, and education. Especially in the medical field, since the king of the Magnetic Drum Kingdom next door changed, the doctors with superb medical skills in their country have left one after another, and Air naturally accepted them all without courtesy. This has also enabled Alabasta's medical level to continue to improve linearly, and it may even replace the Lonely Drum Kingdom as a new, medical power. After eating for a while, Air had a full understanding of the current situation of the kingdom. He put down his knife and fork and planned to go to the training ground of the Royal Special Operations Force, or RU Force, with the Yaka and others to see the situation. During this period, Vivi also came over and followed everyone there. When a few people arrived at the training ground, the members of RU were pairing up and competing with each other. Air observed them from a distance for a while, and was quite satisfied with their performance except for some minor flaws. Yaka saw Air nodding, so he stepped forward and called everyone to stop. After they all lined up neatly, he motioned for Air to come forward and speak. Air, who has been following news about this force for 3 years, met them for the first time today. Stepping forward, before Air could say anything, the soldiers below recognized him and let out bursts of exclamations. "It's His Highness Air. I actually saw a real person. I read that right. He is the pride of the kingdom, His Highness Air." The soldiers talked for a while. Regarding Air, they could hear rumors about him all the time, whether from newspapers or from people around them. Air is not only the adopted son of His Majesty the King, but also the fiancé of Princess Vivi. Or Marine Supernova, the marine general who made countless pirates fearful. It also developed Alabasta into the godlike figure he is today. Without Air opening his mouth, everyone spontaneously chanted his name. "Your Highness Air, Your Highness Air, Your Highness Air." Seeing everyone's enthusiastic eyes, Air couldn't resist. He didn't expect that he had such a high reputation in the kingdom now. After reacting, he quickly pressed his hands to let everyone calm down. The soldiers were very considerate. As soon as Air made a gesture, they fell silent and waited expectantly for him to speak. Air coughed and began to speak. "Since everyone knows me, I won't introduce myself. You may have heard that 3 years ago a government admitted that legal pirates invaded Alabasta. Although I discovered and stopped it in time, it also made me realize the fragility of the country. So I asked His Majesty Cobra to select strong men from across the country and established this army. The country uses marine elite training methods to train you, and gives you the latest equipment, the best food, and the highest salary. And you have not disappointed His Majesty and me. After hard work, you have become the most elite warriors in the kingdom and the strongest guarantee of the kingdom. Quote. This speech was very successful. The soldiers listened with excitement and wanted to rush to the front line immediately to sacrifice their lives for His Majesty the King and His Highness Heir. Seeing that the fire was almost done, Heir finally revealed the purpose of his coming here today. Now, I will give you a gift that can improve your strength. Hearing this, Ikaram and Yaka couldn't help but look at Belle. Vivi also thought of something and looked at Heir in surprise. Under the expectant and curious eyes of the soldiers, Heir was surrounded by black fog, and ugly little bats flew out of the fog, landed on the shoulders of the soldiers, and began the first embrace ceremony. Ikarim and Yaka are no exception. They were all bitten by bats and received the baptism of special energy. If one can transform more than 100 people in one breath, assuming each person has 100 years of vitality, that would be a full 5,000 years of life. Fortunately, he sucked enough on the way here, sucking more than 200 pirates, and the gangster gained 10,000 years of vitality. Otherwise, he would have been drained dry. After the soldiers survived the transformation period, they all looked at their hands in horror, touched their fangs, and felt a little at a loss for a moment. Heir quickly comforted them and explained his abilities to them. When they knew that they were equivalent to eating a devil fruit, they all became excited and began to excitedly study their new abilities. Looking at the scene that seemed like a group of demons dancing wildly, Heir couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth, turned around and said to the three Ikarims who had also transformed, and then turned around and took Vivi into an empty room next to the training ground. Arriving in this room that looked like a place for official business, Heir took Vivi to find a chair and sat down, then picked up the documents on the table and looked through them. After a while, there was a knock on the door of the room, and Yaka walked in with 5 young people. Your Highness, these are the 5 strongest people in the Ru unit. After Yaka finished speaking, the 5 people quickly stepped forward to salute and introduce themselves. The 5 people from left to right are: Shuishi is a 24-year-old fat man who is less than 190 centimeters tall but weighs over 400 kilograms. The 26-year-old skinny Zugan Kunt is over 4 meters tall and weighs only 150 pounds. There is also Theodore, who has a weathered face of 40 or 50 years old, but is actually just 27 years old. And the only female among the 5 people, she is only 140 centimeters tall. Raya's 23-year-old legal loli Doreen. Finally, there is the 2-meter-tall, 20-year-old shy boy Kill Lin who looks the most normal in the field and is the only one mentioned before who has mastered all 6 poses. Looking at the 5 people with their own characteristics in front of him, Heir silently backed away tactically. He suddenly felt like he was facing those people from CP9. With a slight cough, he took out a map of Alabasta from his clothes and spread it on the table. After gesturing for a few people to come closer, he said, I will divide Alabasta into 5 areas: southeast, northwest, and middle. You will each lead 19 Ru members to station in one area. As the squad leader, you have the responsibility to protect the people in the area and eliminate pirates and bandits. At the same time, I allow you to select potential soldiers and children for training in your respective areas. Heir pointed to the 5 circles on the map and watched the 5 people seriously explain their missions. At the same time, it also explained that their army was directly under the command of the royal family and no one was allowed to interfere. The 5 of them were all excited when they heard that they had been entrusted with the important task, and quickly assured Heir that they would complete the task he assigned them and not let him down. Heir raised his chin with satisfaction and took out a copy of Hockey's training experience that he had compiled and handed it to Lin En, the leader. This is Hockey's training method. You can take it and make a few copies, and practice it well when you go back. Lin En regarded it as a treasure and carefully took the booklet and put it in her arms like a treasure. Yes, we will definitely understand it carefully. Well, that's all I have to say. You all go back and pack up and get ready to go. Several people saluted, turned around respectfully, and left. Heir suddenly thought of something, stopped them again and said, As a senior, I want to tell you a truth. When fighting with an enemy, dodge the opponent's attacks if you can. Don't just stand there stupidly and use your iron body to resist, you know. The 5 people didn't know why, but they still kept these words firmly in their hearts, bowed and left. Looking at their backs, Air suddenly felt that it would not be impossible to change Marine's 6 styles to 5 styles. Shaking his head, Air got rid of the distractions in his mind. In the next few days, after Air finished handling domestic affairs, he returned to the 3 daughters of Ain and began to carry out his mission. Just when he was diligently catching pirates and maintaining public order. What he didn't know, was that a conspiracy against him, or against Alabasta, had already begun. Time goes back to 5 days ago. That night, after the meeting, Cobra took a shower and was about to rest after relieving the fatigue of the day. Bang 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 tilde operator. There was a sudden knock on the door. Cobra opened the door in his nightgown. Looking at the stranger at the door, he asked doubtfully, "Who are you?" The visitor bowed respectfully and said, "I am the attendant of Pengu City." "Your Majesty Cobra, I'm sorry to bother you so late." Cobra kindly said it was okay, and then asked him why he came. "Your Majesty Cobra, the 5 elders want to see you." 5 elders. Hearing that they wanted to see him, Cobra was a little confused but still followed the visitors and left. What he didn't notice was that there were 10 pools of scarlet blood on the ground not far from him, telling the details of tonight. Following the attendant, he walked through the long corridor, stepped on the road paved with a wide red carpet, and arrived at a dark hall. The attendant stopped, stood in front of the arch, turned around and said with a smile, "Your Majesty Cobra, I brought you here. The 5 elders are waiting inside." "Thank you." After thanking him, Cobra looked at the road in front of him and had an ominous premonition in his heart. "If I remember correctly, this leads to the Void Throne. What is the purpose of the 5 elders calling me here to meet? Quality." Suppressing the uneasiness in his heart, Cobra stepped inside. Stepping on the red carpet, we arrived under the throne of the void. Then a scene that surprised him occurred. The 5 elders stood with their backs to him, bowing respectfully to the throne, while a stranger sat on the throne in an upright manner. "Who are you? No one should be allowed to sit in that seat. Cobra, pay attention to your tone. The person in front of you is the noble Lord I Am." The 5 elders turned around, looked at Cobra with a serious face and said, "Pay attention to your tone, the person in front of you is Lord I Am." The 5 elders turned around, looked at Cobra with a serious face and said, "I Am. I've heard of this name before. If I remember correctly. Don't explore secrets that can never be answered." I Am, who was sitting on the throne, finally spoke. He looked down at Cobra from above and said calmly, "Mew is looking for you just to confirm one thing. Tell me, Neferutari D. Air, what does the name mean?" Cobra did not answer, but looked at the 5 elders. Seeing them looking at him murderously, he sighed helplessly. "It looks like I won't be able to get out alive today." Single quote. After sighing, he raised his head and looked at I Am without any sign of weakness, and said calmly, 800 years ago, Queen Lily of Neferutari left a letter that was passed down from generation to generation in the royal family. After reading the letter, my young brother and I made a decision together. His newly born child will inherit the surname of his ancestor, and this child is Tofilutari D. Air. Im's eyes widened slightly, he looked at Cobra and murmured thoughtfully, "Ancestor." Sure enough. As he finished speaking, a black shadow passed through Cobra's back and penetrated his chest. "Wow," Cobra screamed, a large amount of blood spat out from his mouth, and he fell to the ground. I always thought that it was because of Lily's mistake 800 years ago that the historical text was scattered around the world. Now it seems that everything was carefully designed by her in order to reveal the true history to the public. Quote. Coughing and spitting out 2 mouthfuls of blood, Cobra managed to look up at the figure on the throne, showing a faint smile. True history, ahem, will eventually surface, the world will usher in a true dawn, and Queen Lily's expectations will eventually come true. Looking at Cobra who was so boastful, I Am frowned, and then another black shadow penetrated Cobra again. This time Cobra could no longer hold on and fell to the ground helplessly. At the last moment before becoming confused, he thought of his brothers, Vivi and Air. "Vivi and Alabasta, leave it to you." In this way, the benevolent King Cobra breathed his last. Ignoring the lifeless corpses on the ground, the 5 elders bowed respectfully, waiting for Im's order. The Alabasta and Neferutari families no longer need to exist. Im stepped down from the throne and sentenced a country to death with just these words. Time turned to the present. Air led the navy to defeat the invasion of a group of pirates again and was stationed in place to rest. Baloo 690 Baloo Baloo. Air casually took out the phone bug from his pocket. Looking at the familiar look, he smiled and asked, Vivi, why did you call me suddenly? Do you miss me? On the other end of the phone, Vivi said with a tearful voice and sobs. Air, Daddy, he was killed. Alabasta was removed from the world government. Marine's buster call is coming. As soon as the voice on the other end of the phone fell, Ain hurried over with a stack of newspapers. Air, what's wrong? Your military rank has been stripped away, and you are now a wanted criminal by the government. The words stirred up 1,000 waves, and all the Marine soldiers' brains were buzzing when they heard the news, and they couldn't believe their ears. Are you kidding? Air Vice Admiral is a Marine hero, how could he be wanted by the government? That's right, Major Ain, you are joking, right? Haha, what you said is true, it shocked me. The sailors spoke one after another, not believing Air's words, and listlessly listed Air's achievements. Blah blah blah. The phone bug turned into charcoal in Air's hands. He stood up with a gloomy face, surrounded by countless thunder snakes. He fully understood that this bullshit mission was just a trap set by the world government. Flying Squirrel and others also made arrangements in advance, with the purpose of directly erasing Alabasta and his existence. Ain, I'll leave this to you. I want to go back to Alabasta. Ain looked at him worriedly, holding the newspaper tightly with both hands, feeling even more weak. A big hand covered her head and rubbed her head gently. Air said calmly, I'll leave this to you, don't worry about me, I'm very strong. As soon as the words fell, Air turned into thunder and disappeared from the horizon with everyone watching. Asshole world government, show it to lousy. On the sea, a fleet composed of 20 super-large warships and hundreds of small and medium-sized warships was cutting through the waves and heading quickly towards Alabasta. On the leading warship, Admiral Akainu crossed his chest and looked at the sea without knowing what he was thinking. On the remaining warships, 10 vice admirals including Flying Squirrel, Doberman, Huoshaoshan, Ghost Spider, and Stallo Berry are also ready. In addition to nearly 100 rear admirals and commodores, 1,000 school-level officers, and more than 50,000 elite Navy soldiers. This is literally a supercharged version of Buster Call. As Air guessed, most of the people here were colleagues who had been with him during the first half of the patrol. The world government has already arranged this. Just waiting for an order, these people will attack Alabasta and wipe it off the map. At this time, Alabasta was in chaos, and the citizens widened their eyes in disbelief when looking at today's newspapers. King Cobra colluded with the Revolutionary Army, tried to disrupt the World Summit, and committed suicide after the incident was exposed. Single quote. Everyone who saw the news felt as if God was joking with them. It was completely off the mark. But what worries them the most is the fact that the newspaper openly revealed the news that Marine launched a Buster Call and planned to bulldoze the entire Alabasta in one fell swoop. This made the citizens feel uneasy, and some of them, seeing that the situation was not good, were already packing their things and planning to run away. At this time, a radio sound suddenly sounded. Vivi's voice appeared in everyone's ears. People of the kingdom, please stay calm and follow the king's army to retreat to the interior in an orderly manner. The royal family will protect everyone's safety. Please trust us. The words were repeated over and over again, and a large number of king's troops appeared in cities along the coast. After the initial confusion, the citizens resolutely packed up their belongings and followed the king's army to leave their homes and seek shelter elsewhere. In the palace, Vivi repeated her speech tirelessly, urging people to evacuate as soon as possible. I prayed silently in my heart and was full of worries about Alabasta's future. See Circle Calendar 1518, June 6 at noon. The Marines' Buster Call fleet arrived in the southern waters of Alabasta. After reaching the firing range, the warships began to carry out devastating attacks on coastal cities at Akainu's order. Countless people who were fleeing heard the sound of shelling and looked back at their homes in flames and shed tears. The artillery fire continued to deepen as the warship advanced, directly plowing down all the buildings within the field of vision. But fortunately, Alabasta has a large territory and the shelling cannot affect the inland areas. Akainu commanded the navy to land at the port of rapeseed flowers, and he himself followed the large troops ashore, preparing to advance directly to the royal capital. To the north, on the only road from rapeseed flowers to the royal capital, more than 300,000 of the kingdom's standing army have gathered, and the RU troops are also waiting seriously under the leadership of 5 squad captains. As the commander this time, Ikaram and his deputies Bel and Yaka were also fully armed and looked at the south with serious expressions. Can we stop the Buster Call? That's enough firepower to destroy an island. Yes, I heard that the O'Hara from 20 years ago disappeared from the map directly under the Buster Call. My wife and children are still waiting for me at home. I don't know if I can see them alive. There were discussions from time to time among the king's army, and everyone's hearts were filled with a layer of gloom. Cheer up, everyone. Ikaram stood on the high platform and yelled at everyone through the loudspeaker. The enemy is in front of us and your families are right behind us. Tell me, you want to be a coward and run away and be laughed at. I still want to fight for my family and enemies and let them know how powerful Alabasta is. Quote. Looking up at Ikarim who was speaking above, someone in the crowd silently clenched his fists. Just then a soldier raised his hand and shouted, "My wife just gave birth to a son for me, and Lousy is going to fight these Marines for them. Yes, I will fight with them for my family." As someone took the lead, the others also plucked up the courage to loudly vent their anger, determined to defend their homeland to the death. Ikaram looked at the soldiers with high morale. He wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes happily and continued to encourage. Everyone, don't forget, we still have the heroes of Alabasta, CEBC, hold on, His Highness Heir will definitely come back. Speaking of heir, the soldiers all showed excitement. Yes, we still have His Highness Heir. His Royal Highness Heir is the hero of Alabasta, he will definitely be able to repel Buster Call. For His Highness Heir, for Alabasta, the courage of the soldiers was completely aroused. They built fortifications on the spot and planned to fight Marine to the end. See Circle Calendar 1518. On the evening of June 6, Marines' 5,000 advance troops took the lead in encountering the King's army. The Marines relied on their strong individual qualities to launch the attack, while the royal family relied on the terrain and numbers to mount a tenacious resistance. At first, under the resistance of Yaka, Bel and the RU troops, the King's army still gained some advantages. But with the support of the Marine follow-up troops and the addition of general-level high-end combat power, the King's army began to retreat steadily. Ikaram looked at the current situation, gritted his teeth, transformed into a vampire form, and led the remaining troops to launch a desperate charge. At this time, boom, thunder broke out on the ground, and with the thunder, blazing white light shone on the faces of everyone on the battlefield. Both sides stopped tacitly and looked up at the sky. Roar, dragon roars resounded all around along with the lightning. In the shocked eyes of everyone, a behemoth over 500 meters tall was wrapped in lightning and flames, vibrating its wings, announcing its arrival. Sakazuki, get out of here Lousy. Air in the sky opened his bloody mouth, and the terrifying dragon's breath that blended thunder, lightning and flames struck towards the back of the battlefield. The roar of the thunder flame dragon. Are you coming? Akainu's eyes covered by his hat narrowed slightly. Looking at the fierce attack, he jumped up, and his magma-formed right fist turned into a dog's head and collided fiercely with the thunder flame pillar. The strong wind generated by the collision of the two made the code behind him rustle, and the fluttering word justice seemed particularly dazzling at this time. Look at the one who blocked his attack. Akainu, Air wanted to rush forward and push him to the ground and rub him. It can be seen that Wentz was sensing the battlefield below, and looking at the soldiers who had suffered heavy losses but still refused to retreat, he suppressed the thought of giving Akainu a meal, turned around and rushed towards the battlefield. What does it feel like when a 500-meter giant falls from the sky? The King's army doesn't know, but the Marines are going to be scared to death. Fortunately, Air did not maintain his dragon form and smash down, but changed into a human animal form, and directly knocked out the fish with conquerors as majestic as the sea. Then he instantly appeared in front of a rear admiral and hit his chest with a dragon claw with 3 buffs, armed color, fire, and thunder. The moment he saw Air, Rear Admiral subconsciously put his hands on his waist and performed the stunt he was most proud of. Iron body. Bang. He was punched by air in front of him, and his chest suddenly sunk, and his ribs were broken to an unknown extent. He flew backwards like a bowling ball, knocking down several people behind him, and disappeared before his eyes. Idiot. Quote. Air ignored him and continued to activate Wushwang in Marine one punch at a time. That's it, Air. Just surrender and capture him. Just when Air was in high spirits, the ghost spider suddenly jumped out, waving his hands and using his hair to attack Air with a total of 10 knives. Clang. Air pulled out Iukiri from his waist and easily blocked the blow. Do you know? Impossible. The ghost spider looked in shock at Air, who took his full blow with one hand, and was speechless in surprise. In Marine, I've long been unhappy with you hawkish guys. Conqueror's entanglement -1 sword style 500 million volts Reikiri. Swinging away 10 long swords, Air swung out a 100-meter sword energy with red lightning attached to his backhand. The sword energy hit Ghost Spider's chest, pushing him backwards for several hundred meters. The terrifying sword energy cut a bottomless valley into the entire sand. The few Marines who were still awake looked at the Ghost Spider covered in sand and dust. Their eyes turned white, and a large gash was opened from their armpits to their lower abdomen. They didn't know whether they were alive or dead, and their eyes widened in shock. Mouth. Vice Admiral. How is it possible that the elite Vice Admiral of this department was killed with one blow? This is Marine Supernova, known as Marine's strongest monster in 500 years. The true strength of Fire Dragon Air. Veteran Vice Admirals such as Flying Squirrel and Huo Shaoshan also shed a drop of cold sweat when they looked at the Ghost Spider, who was not sure whether it was alive or dead. If it were him, he probably wouldn't be able to block such an attack. Looking at Air standing with a sword, in the hearts of Flying Squirrel and others, he is no longer the famous junior, but a strong man who is on par with the monsters in New World. Flying Squirrel, Huo Shaoshan, for the sake of my colleagues, if you leave now, I can forget the blame, otherwise Ghost Spider will be your fate. Air, in the form of a dragon, held a sword in one hand and pointed it directly at the flying squirrels. With Conqueror's words, he brought a strong sense of oppression to them. At this moment, a magma giant fist dissolved the oppressive atmosphere. Dark Hound, I will deal with this brat, and you can continue to complete the mission. Akainu finally arrived at the battlefield. Looking at Air, who also easily neutralized his attack, he calmly ordered the flying squirrel and others. Several people nodded, turned around and wanted to kill the king's army. Did Laozi ask you to move? Air became elemental and bypassed Akainu at a speed far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Standing in front of a few people, he summoned a thunder and lightning dragon to devour Zhang Zhang and them. At the critical moment, Akainu appeared in front of several people, and lava erupted from his body like a volcano to block the attack. Your opponent is me, asshole Akainu. The moment the thunder dragon was blocked, the experienced flying squirrels dispersed in a tacit understanding, sparing him and running away. Do you think you can outrun lightning? Lightning flashes. With the roar, Air turned into thunder and lightning and caught up with Dalmatia in the form of the dog fruit Dalmatian. The sword that entangled Conquerors directly chopped him away. The moment Akainu arrived, he disappeared again, appeared on top of Staloberry, and kicked him into the ground. Soon, as lightning flashed, the remaining vice admirals were knocked to the ground by Air. Akainu couldn't keep up with him even if he wanted to stop them. He picked up Doberman by the neck and threw him at the feet of a Commodore. Air looked at him with cold eyes and said coldly, "Get out." Commodore's legs went limp and he slumped to the ground. When he saw Air frowning, he hurriedly dragged the unconscious Doberman back. The remaining Marines who were still conscious also dragged their unconscious companions, supported each other, and evacuated in embarrassment. Akainu didn't stop him. These people staying here were just a hindrance. In his opinion, as long as he solved the Air in front of him, everything would be over. Watching Marine retreat, the king's army erupted in enthusiastic cheers. Ikaram, take everyone and retreat. His body was covered with scars. Ikaram, who struggled to get up with the help of Bel and Gaka, looked at Air's back and couldn't help shouting worriedly, "Your Highness. That's enough, obey the order. Your mission has been completed." The three of Ikaram clenched their fists unwillingly, turned around with tears in their eyes and shouted, "Retreat." The entire army retreats. After the soldiers from both sides left, Air took off the coat of justice from his back and stepped on it. Sakazuki, let's start the second round. After saying that, a red light flashed in his eyes, and his powerful sense of knowledge noticed Akainu's movements in advance. The figure left the place in a flash, and the place where he had just stood was engulfed by magma, forming a small volcanic eruption. As soon as he stood firm, Akainu's figure had already come closer, and the fist wrapped in lava hit his chest. Air didn't dare to force the attack and turned into lightning again and hid. Although he is not afraid of the high temperature of magma, Akainu's fist can erupt with the powerful force of a volcanic eruption, so he still has to be careful. Can you just hide? Is this what Air the Butcher is capable of? Facing the slippery air, Akainu, who had no advantage in speed, decisively turned on the taunting mode. The thunder and lightning regrouped into Air's figure. Looking at the snarling red dog, he raised the corners of his mouth slightly. I can't pretend I didn't hear this. Idiot, if you want to fight me in close combat with my SSS level physique and SSS level Phantom Beast ability, Lousy will kill you with all his energy. Quote. Not knowing what Air was thinking, Akainu also showed a successful smile. Young and energetic brat, can't you stand it even after saying a few random words? It's ridiculous. Two guys who were confident in themselves met again. He raised his hand and swung out a sword energy, which was smashed away by Akainu's punch. He didn't care that the sword that was entangled in Conqueror's body was approaching. One sword style breaking the moon and cutting through the air. Seeing the attack entangled with red lightning, Yinyan did not dodge and chose to directly follow it. Seeing his actions, Air couldn't help but be startled, and then increased his strength a little bit. Exukiri stopped when she was still some distance away from her fist, and collided with the magma fist in the air. Another surprising scene for Air happened. Akainu actually withstood this attack with only the fruit and powerful weapons. Akainu didn't stop, twisted his right leg and whipped his waist with a whip kick. Air retracted his knife and defended, and the muscles in his hands bulged to block it. Then the tail behind him swung towards him. Akainu was experienced and caught the tail flick with his hands covered with armor, then he held the tail and threw Air with both hands. After flying upside down in the air and swinging 2 slashes at him to stop his pursuit, Air used his legs to adjust his body shape by stepping on moonwalk. As expected of Admiral, it's really scary. Kid, don't imitate Kizaru's tone when talking to me. Bah, speed is power. Have you ever been kicked by lightning? Nani. Looking at Air appearing behind him, Akainu looked surprised. Bang. With a powerful long-distance shot, Akainu was kicked thousands of meters away by Air like a ball. After dusting himself off, Akainu wiped the blood from his mouth and stood up from the sand pit. This kid's speed is so fast that I can catch it with my senses, but my body can't react. We must find a way to restrain him. Single quote. Thinking about it, his lower body shot out lava like a rocket and rushed towards Air. Great eruption. One sword-style Schwanyu slash. The two became entangled again and were inseparable. I don't know how long it took until the sun appeared on the horizon and the sunlight spread to the earth again. Finally, Akainu found an opportunity, took Air's Conqueror's slash, and put a special ring on Air's wrist. Succeeded. Being suppressed by Seastone, you can no longer use that lightning speed. Seeing that the plan was successful, Akainu stood up and taunted, holding his injured chest. Air, whose clothes were torn but had no wounds on his body, looked at the Seastone on his wrist and lowered his head with a malicious smile. Asshole, as a Marine Admiral, you actually resorted to such insidious tricks. Air pulled the ring with an anxious look on his face, loudly accusing Akainu of being shameless. Insidious. Don't be naive, kid, you can do whatever it takes to win. Akainu sneered disdainfully, walked slowly to Air, and raised his magma-formed right fist. Go to hell, kid. Just when the attack was about to land, the panic on Air's face suddenly disappeared. He grabbed Akainu's wrist and showed him a big smile. Akainu was suddenly startled, and a fear from the depths of his soul enveloped him. Thunder Flame Mode 10 billion volts big explosion. With Air itself at the center, a radius of 3 kilometers was covered by the explosion, and the intense light could be seen even from hundreds of kilometers away. Boom! With a huge roar, a terrifying mushroom cloud rose from the center of the battlefield. Cough cough cough. In a huge sand pit that was as graceful as a meteorite impact, a hand suddenly stretched out from it, and Air clawed his way out of the pit with difficulty. Ba ba ba. After spitting out a few mouthfuls of sand, Air stood up and looked around, but did not find Akainu. No way, did the red dog get killed by me? Just when he was so confused, bursts of hot steam rose not far away, and then the entire sand turned into lava, and Akainu was holding his left arm and struggled to walk out of the hole he opened. Air looked at it and saw that Akainu's clothes were badly damaged and could only barely cover important parts. His whole body was charred black and covered with spider web-like scars after being struck by lightning. The left forearm is completely charred and is probably unusable. Looking at Akainu, who was gasping for air and whose combat power had been reduced by at least 1/3, Air showed a kind smile. 3 days later, Air couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he saw Akainu unable to get up from his feet. Apart from anything else, this guy's ability to withstand beatings is top-notch. Air pestered Conqueror's attacks and knocked him to the ground time and time again, but he always stood up again and again, as if he was possessed by Kinemon, crazy. Sit-ups. Fortunately, Air was strong enough. He held him down and beat him for 3 days and 3 nights before finally knocking him down. In fact, Akainu is already dead, but he just wants to fight a few more times. He took out the key to the seastone ring from his body, untied his hands, and put his hands behind his back. Air carried him and his figure flashed, flying in the direction perceived by Shenwen's. Hundreds of kilometers away, Ikaram and others are leading the army to be stationed here. Vivi also came to the front line from the royal capital to inspect the situation of the soldiers in the camp, and spoke to comfort everyone from time to time. Members of the Rue force were scattered around, protecting Her Royal Highness the Princess at every step. Doreen, you guys should go and rest, I'll be fine by myself. Vivi looked at the RU members who had not rested and insisted on following her, and said with concern. Your Highness Vivi, it is our duty to protect you. This is the task given to our RU troops by Your Highness Air, and we will complete it even if we risk our lives. Air, speaking of Air who was still fighting hard against the enemy, Vivi couldn't help but worriedly folded her hands and closed her eyes to pray silently for him. Why, are you worried about me? Vivi's body trembled. She opened her eyes and stared blankly at the man who appeared in front of her. Seeing that familiar face, the anguish that had been suppressed in his heart since Cobra's death finally found a breakthrough and came out all at once. Air, he threw Akainu to the ground and hurriedly caught Vivi, who threw herself into his arms. Looking at her crying, Air silently stroked her back. After she cried for a while and felt a little better, Air said, "Don't worry, I will always be with you from now on." Wiping away the tears from her eyes, Vivi nodded heavily. After a few words of comfort, Vivi finally calmed down. Air held her hand and said to Doreen beside her, "Go get some more seastone chains, tie this guy up for me, and arrange for 24-hour guarding. Then, go call Ikaram and the rest of the RU captains over. I have something to discuss with everyone." After receiving the order, Doreen quickly dragged the unconscious Akainu to do things. After personally watching Akainu being tied into a rice dumpling and locked in a seastone cage, Air came to a temporary tent. At this time, everyone had arrived. Looking at the few people who had no wounds on their bodies, Air happily came to the main seat and sat down. "It seems that you are doing well." Ikaram touched the heavily injured chest and excited Kaido. "Thanks to His Highness's ability, not only me, but also the other members of the RU unit have recovered through the soldiers' voluntary blood donation. A moderate amount of blood-sucking soldiers only recovered, will be weak for a while." Hearing the good news, Air felt a little better. "Very good, the RU troops have made great contributions this time, and I will not forget your contribution." Lin En and the other 5 puffed up their chests proudly when they heard Air's praise. "But the most important task now is the follow-up processing of the matter. Akainu has been captured by me, and I have my own plans for him. Then there is the pension for fallen soldiers and the resettlement of citizens who have lost their homes." With the arrival of Air, orders were issued from the camp, and the situation in Alabasta was soon stabilized. As for the news that Marine Admiral had been defeated and captured, he had no way of hiding it, and it soon spread throughout the camp, and then spread to the entire kingdom. "Marine is defeated. Alabasta is safe. Thanks to His Highness Air, otherwise we would all be doomed. Long live His Highness Air. Yes, long live His Highness Air." Just as the citizens of Alabasta were celebrating their victory, newspapers all over the world were making waves. Naval Headquarters. Sengoku slapped the table, looked at the Marine executives in the conference room, and said with a gloomy expression. I just received the news from Flying Squirrel. The news that Sakazuki was defeated and captured is true. Everyone, please tell me what you think. The silence in the room could be heard, but the Rear Admiral leader had not yet recovered from the news of the defeat of one of the most powerful Marines. Kizaru still had that lazy look on his face and said casually. It's really scary. Brother Air is indeed a monster. Even Sakazuki is no match for him. Pelusalino, speak to me. Sengoku shouted angrily. Kizaru helplessly spread his hands and simply closed his mouth. Aokiji put down the newspaper in his hand, changed from his usual laziness, looked at Sengoku seriously and asked, Mr. Sengoku, I have a question. What did Air Vice Admiral do wrong that forced the government to order his execution? In terms of merit, he actively captured pirates, making all pirates fearful when they heard his name. In terms of character, he generously assisted the reconstruction of villages and towns that had been plundered by pirates, and was respected by the people. For such a colleague, what reason do we have to arrest him? Does such behavior deserve justice? Everyone looked at him in disbelief, never expecting that he, who was always lazy, would say such a thing. Bang! Sengoku slapped the table and stood up, answering without hesitation even though he agreed with Aokiji's words. This is the order of the 5 elders. Are you going to disobey the order of the world government, Kuzan? The two stared at each other, neither of them willing to give in. See, at this time, the tense atmosphere was interrupted by the sound of a chair twitching. Zephyr stood up with a gloomy face under the gaze of everyone, and walked out without looking back. Point 0. Shit world government, let them eat shit. Boom. The angry Zephyr smashed the wall and left angrily. Zephyr, you fool, come back here. Sengoku wanted to stop him, but he was already gone. Another voice sounded, and Aokiji also stood up. Sorry, Mr. Sengoku, I don't feel well today. I seem to have a cold. After saying that, he turned and left. As Aokiji left, a group of Marine Dove generals and some of Zephyr's disciples also stood up and followed Aokiji for various reasons. Hahu, boo. The snot bubbles exploded, and Garp woke up in a daze. He rubbed his eyes and looked at the conference room that was missing a third, and yawned. Is the meeting over? Oh, Suru, do you want to try my new tea? You fool, just stop it all. Due to differences in the handling of air within Naval Headquarters, they can only wait and see for the time being. Others who saw the news also had different reactions. New World Moby Dick. Whitebeard took a sip of wine and laughed heartily. La 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 la, the Lava Kid has been captured, the Fire Dragon Kid is also wanted, and Marine has lost 2 of its top combat forces. Sengoku won't be able to sleep. Quote, Wanokuni, Island. Aha, Fire Dragon has been kicked out of Marine, and Lousy wants to invite him to join Beast's pirates. Kaido laughed and clapped his hands and said happily. Jin interrupted his fantasy and said calmly, it's impossible, our invitation was rejected by him before. Nani, woo, I'm so sad. Cake Island. The ant stuffed dessert into her mouth with one hand and held the newspaper in the other, looking at Air's photo on it with bloodshot eyes. Fire Dragon Kid, ruined my tea party. Katakuri. As she shouted, a tall man with a thick scarf around his neck and a black metal style walked out. Go to Alabasta and ask this brat if he wants a marriage or a war. Yes, Mom. Katakuri calmly accepted the mission and began to prepare for going to Alabasta. An uninhabited island in New World. Ha ha ha, the government is doing something stupid again. Kids, let's drink to the Fire Dragon Boy. Oh. The Red Hair Pirates use this as an excuse to continue the party. And eyes returned to Alabasta. Next to the dilapidated Rapeseed Port, 30 dilapidated warships docked here. Air looked at Flying Squirrel and others sitting opposite, and said casually, Flying Squirrel Vice Admiral, you are my prisoner now, don't look at me like this. The Flying Squirrel looked at Air with the old god around, feeling extremely aggrieved. Originally, they planned to evacuate first after receiving the news of Akainu's defeat. But who would have thought that as soon as the warship started, a thunder column would strike down from the sky. The warship that bore the brunt of the attack immediately collapsed, and the rear admiral on board was so electrocuted that it became incontinent. Several people who knew Air's ability did not dare to take action when they saw this, so they had to order the Marines to stop advancing, lower the anchor, and were imprisoned by Air in disguise. Seeing the constipated expressions on several people's faces, Air stopped teasing them, and instead told them the reason for his visit with a relaxed expression. "Sorry, I was in a hurry and didn't bring Marshal Sengoku's phone bug with me. I have something I want to talk to him about. Please help me." The flying squirrel sighed, threw the phone bug to him helplessly, and then left with the people. Without even thinking about it, Air would definitely have to talk to the marshal about the ransom next. They didn't want to see such a humiliating scene. Ignoring them, Air called directly, and the other party quickly connected. "Hey, Marshal Sengoku, how are you doing lately?" Air greeted him familiarly, and Sengoku's veins popped out on the other end of the phone. "Huh, Air, you are really amazing. The face of the government and Marine has been completely trampled under your feet." "Ha ha ha, thank you Marshal for the compliment, but isn't this your own choice? It's a pity that I was just promoted to Vice Admiral and I wasn't even happy for 2 days before you deprived me of it. Oh, by the way, I also want to thank you for the big sharp knife you gave me. I can use it very easily." Quote. Sengoku's brain hurt even more as he spoke a series of words in such an angry tone. After scolding Vice Admiral World Government 100 times, he suppressed his anger and gritted his teeth and asked, "Did you call specifically to ridicule me? Tell me your purpose." "Oh, let's get right to the point." Air crossed his legs, took out a long directory from his arms and spoke. "Then let me tell you directly. First of all, we captured a large number of Marine prisoners. Due to the shortage of resources in Alabasta, there is not so much food to supply them. So first hope Marine can bear this cost. Well, a total of 3 billion belly was paid to send it to me." Quote. Sengoku suddenly became furious when he heard Air's request, and said angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? 3 billion baileys, why don't you go and grab it? Ha ha, I'm just robbing, don't forget, I have an admiral, 10 inches 210, generals and countless Marine elites in my hands. If something happens to them, I will not be responsible." Sengoku was so angry that he couldn't even say anything. He wanted to go to Alabasta and strangle this fool immediately. By the way, the above is just for food expenses, as well as urban reconstruction expenses, pensions for soldiers' casualties, subsidies for displaced people, etc., plus the ransom of the sailors. A total of 500 billion belly is enough. 500 billion? Are you kidding me? Go ahead and have your sweet dream, you idiot. Gaga. The phone was hung up hard. Air smiled nonchalantly, put the phone in his pocket, and walked out of the room calmly. Smiling at the sailors who were watching eagerly, Air turned into lightning and disappeared. Several vice admirals headed by Flying Squirrel watched him disappear indifferently, and they just took 2 puffs of cigarettes in an even more decadent manner. "It's so embarrassing, it's so embarrassing. Even if I return to the headquarters, I can't hold my head up." Quote. After that, the two sides fought a war of words for another 2 months before they unified their opinions with the intervention of the government. In the end, in addition to paying 30 billion belly in cash as compensation, the government also sent a large amount of weapons, food, equipment and other materials to support Alabasta's reconstruction. After this wave, Air can be said to be Qin Shuang touching the wire, winning. On the other hand, Marine and the government were furious, especially Sengoku. For a few days, the 5 elders had a conversation every day, just blaming Marine for his incompetence, his handsomeness and neglect of duty, etc., which made his hair turn gray. Sengoku actually considered whether to send Garp, Aokiji, Kizaru, etc. to kill Air directly. But let's not talk about how many people may not be willing to do it, let's talk about Air's strength. If he really wants to run away, no one in Marine except Kizaru can stop him, and if Kizaru alone, Sengoku is afraid that he can't beat Air. Don't worry if someone doesn't get caught by the time and another one sticks in, then his role as a marshal will be over. Just when he was struggling, another piece of news made him break through his defense. "Nani, you said Alabasta disappeared. What do you mean? Please tell me clearly." The soldier on the other end of the phone was almost scared to death when he heard the marshal's roar. He picked up the phone tremblingly and reported in a low voice. Report to the marshal, our ship is under remote surveillance 3 nautical miles away from Alabasta according to the order of the headquarters. But just now, Shenkting Island, where Alabasta belongs, flew into the sky after a tremor, and then disappeared before our eyes. Flying into the sky? What nonsense are you talking about? How could the island? Wait, there are indeed people in this world who can do such a thing. Golden Lion, isn't it good to become a legend after disappearing for so many years? Are you still thinking about going against the government? Then a lot of trash talk came out of Sengoku's mouth. When the soldier who answered the phone heard the sound of smashing things on the other side, he was so scared that his soul flew out and he simply closed his eyes and fainted. And what is going on? 2 months ago, Hina and others discussed it and led all the soldiers who voluntarily left Marine to Alabasta. Seeing these men who were still willing to follow him, Air was also very moved. Arrange them into the Kingdom Guard and let Ikaram and others protect Vivi. Air quietly left Alabasta one night. Relying on the intelligence collected over the past 2 years and after 2 months of searching, Air finally found this guy somewhere on the Grand Line. Looking at the Golden Lion Shiki in front of him, Air couldn't help but sigh at his unfortunate fate. He used to be able to compete with Whitebeard and Roger, but now he is suppressed by the rudder embedded on his head, and his powerful conqueror's haki can no longer be released. Both of his feet were cut off by his own hands because of his escape from Impel Down, and his sword was also installed on his feet to become prosthetic limbs. Not to mention his strength compared to the current Whitebeard, even if he fought against Doflamingo, he would probably lose more than he would win. Seeing that he was also a hero in the past, Air gave him a decent death and had a head-on life and death fight with him. Another thing that Air didn't expect, Golden Lion didn't know whether it was happy or not. Suddenly it came back to light, and all the haki of the past came back. A slash wave with the top conquerors and weapon color almost cut off Air's human-animal tail. Fortunately, he only recovered for a short moment, and he was quickly defeated by Air. Before he died, he still had a confident and arrogant smile on his face. After obtaining the lion fruit of the Golden Lion, Air immediately rushed back to Alabasta. System, add more points. Nefertari D. Air, gender, male. Age, 16. Personal abilities. Physique SSS 124,874 1 millionths. Swordsmanship SS 22,320 250 thousandths. Physique SS 59,621 250 thousandths. Haki. Armament Haki SS 75,114 250 thousandths. Observation Haki SS 94,181 250 thousandths. Conqueror's Haki SSS 54,484 1 millionths. Skill moves. Shave S, Moonwalk S, Tempest Kick S, Finger Pistol S, Iron Body B, Paper Arts A omitted. Devil Fruit. Dragon Fruit SSS 200,914 1 millionths. Thunder Fruit SS 40,201 250 thousandths. Vampire Fruit S 1,515 50 thousandths. Lion Fruit D 213 1 thousandths. Experience points. 1,185,580. Fusionable fruits. 0. Overall evaluation. SSS 4 Emperor's level. Air now has more than 1 million experience points, half of which he obtained by defeating Akainu and others. Among them, Akainu alone contributed 250,000 experience points, which would be converted into a bounty of 2.5 billion belly. At first, Air was very dissatisfied. He believed that the system underestimated Akainu's strength, and it should be at least 3.5 billion. As a result, the explanation of the system is that Marine is always settled according to military rank. Admiral is 250,000 points, Vice Admiral is 30,000 points, and Rear Admiral is 5,000 points. Even if he defeated Garp, he would only have 30,000 points. Air had no choice but to accept the system's statement. But fortunately, the old guy Golden Lion has a bounty of 4.8135 billion, which makes Air feel happy. This experience is just enough for Air to bring physical skills, sword skills, 2-color haki and thunder fruit to SSS level, and the rest can also bring vampire and Piao Piao to SS level. With a ding, the system quickly completed the upgrade for him. Looking at the more than 80,000 experience points left, I Xing stepped up. At this point, the system's evaluation of him went directly from SSS 4 Emperors level to SSS higher than 4 Emperors level, comparable to peak Roger and Whitebeard. Everything was ready. After Air moved his body, he suddenly bent over and slapped his palm on the ground. Give it to Lousy. The awakened lion fruit ability covered the entire Shengting Island under Air's control. As the earth trembled briefly, Shengmin Island, which covers an area of more than 10 million square kilometers, including a large area of the surrounding sea, began to rise into the sky. Soon they reached an altitude of 5,000 meters. Considering that ordinary people might not be able to adapt for the time being, Air maintained this altitude and controlled the entire country to fly north. The Marines below looked at the huge island flying in the sky, their jaws dropped to the ground one by one, and they were so shocked that they couldn't say a word. It wasn't until the island completely disappeared that the Marines reacted, and the scene before happened. After Sengoku calmed down, he decisively contacted Air and asked him what he meant. Why are you cooperating with Golden Lion? Who told me that I am cooperating with Golden Lion? I can tell you with certainty that Golden Lion is dead and the lion fruit has been inherited by a new ability user. Air was originally calming the people through the radio, but he didn't expect Sengoku to call again. He just couldn't do such troublesome things, so he left the task to Vivi and found a place to have a good chat with Sengoku. Nani? Golden Lion is dead. No, I'm not asking you this. Boy Air, what do you mean by taking the whole country away? Are you afraid that we will suddenly take action and doubt the credibility of the government? Credibility. The government has a bullshit reputation. Those shit-eating 5 elders murdered His Majesty Cobra for no reason, and even charged him with colluding with the revolutionaries. Do these rubbish guys know how to write the word credibility? Listen to me, and send His Majesty Cobra's body to the Sabayati archipelago within 3 days, along with the ransom and compensation you promised, otherwise Lousy will throw the prisoners into the sea to feed the fish. After saying that, he hung up the phone directly. The situation now has completely turned to his side. With the help of Lion Fruit, Air can go wherever he wants with Alabasta, without fear of the threat of Marine or world government. As for Sengoku, let him suffer. Who made him the marshal? 3 days later, Sabayati was on Island 66. This was originally where Marine was based. Yes, it's just that it's extremely lively here today. Hey, what happened? Marshal Sengoku and Kizaru Admiral are both here. More than that, look at the people wearing masks over there. They are members of the CP, a secret government agency. Even the Vice Admiral has more than 10 people here. He must be going to war with the 4 emperors. A few miscellaneous soldiers hid in the corner and whispered. Hey, you guys, what are you muttering about? Get out of here right away. A Marine major patrolled here and looked at the people gathered here and shouted loudly. Yes, N. Several people trembled, saluted and ran away. After everyone walked away, the major turned around and continued patrolling. The government has made a big move here today, and all the sailors below the 66th school level have been dispersed. At noon, Sengoku stood in the clearing with his arms crossed, surrounded by senior generals. Boom! As a thunder exploded, a familiar figure appeared in front of them. Here we come. Single quote. Air was wearing a white suit as always, but there was no longer the coat symbolizing justice on his back. Marshal Sengoku, Mr. Porisalino, Sister Gion, Brother Kaki and all of you, it's been a long time since I last saw you. Are you all here to welcome me? You're so warm. As he said that, Air threw Akainu, who was tied up tightly on his shoulders, to the ground, making the general's eyelids jump. Little Air, it seems that you have made a lot of progress in the past few years. Momosuke Gion greeted Air with a smile. Jaji also waved to him, smiled and nodded. Sengoku strode forward, stood 5 meters in front of Air, and said, No need to talk about reminiscing about old times, let's get started directly. We have brought the body of King Cobra, and the Bailey and supplies you requested are also ready on the ship at the port. Now is the time for you to fulfill your promise. Where are the flying squirrel and the others? Air looked at the coffins placed aside, and then scanned them with his sense of knowledge. After seeing dozens of transport ships filled with cargo parked at the port, he nodded with satisfaction and placed the coffins. A bunch of keys were thrown into Sengoku's hands. This is the key to Sakazuki and the others. As for the flying squirrels, I threw them into the illegal zone. If I don't want anything to happen to them, they should get there quickly. Sengoku glared at Air with the big bunch of keys, then transformed into the Buddha form and slapped him. Big Buddha shock wave. Unfortunately, Air was very fast. He came to Cobra's coffin with a flash of lightning and patted it. In an instant, the coffin rose up and disappeared from the sky. Then he waved to Sengoku with a smile and turned into lightning and shuttled through the port. A few seconds later, the transport ship flew into the sky together under everyone's sight. Kuin, this is the ability of the Golden Lion, I didn't expect that little brother Air also has it. Kizaru put one hand in his pocket and put the other on his forehead, pouting in admiration. Pelusilino, why don't you chase after me? With your speed, you can definitely catch up. Sengoku looked at the leisurely Kizaru and scolded him bitterly. Kizaru spread his hands and moved his mouth towards Akainu on the ground, he said fearfully. Spare me, Mr. Sengoku, I don't dare to chase after such a monster. I still want to sit in Admiral's seat for 2 more years. After saying that, looking at Sengoku's increasingly gloomy expression, he quickly added. Ah, Flying Squirrel Vice Admiral and the others may be in danger, I will save them first. As soon as the words fell, Kizaru turned into a ray of light and disappeared with a whoosh. The speed of dodge was incredible. Quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark quote. Sabayati Archipelago, at an altitude of 10,000 meters, Air looked at Cobra with a smile on his lips, and closed the coffin with grief. Recalling the scenes between the two of them since he could remember, Air's whole body trembled, and a rage that destroyed everything filled his brain. It's all my fault for not noticing the government's conspiracy in advance. Don't worry, Uncle Cobra, I will avenge you. Boom. The originally clear sky was instantly shrouded in darkness. Countless thunder and lightning were swimming in the clouds, and the world seemed to be coming to an end. Fool 5 elders, Lousy will kill you now. Air turned into lightning, shuttled between the clouds, heading towards the red line, and above it was the celestial dragon's pigsty, Mariajoy. Within Mariajoy, the noble celestial dragons, Saint Markarth Blaze, was wandering around the Holy Land as usual, surrounded by his guards, riding his new mount, a tall human slave. Occasionally they meet fellow celestial dragons who are also riding slaves, and the two have to compete with each other. Just when he thought that today would pass happily again, the sky in the Holy Land suddenly turned gloomy. Nay, is it going to rain? Hey, take me back quickly. Blaze, who had a snot in his nose and looked like an idiot, swung his whip and hit the slave on his body, urging him to go back. The slave endured the pain in his body and crawled step by step in humiliation. Just as a group of people were rushing back, one of Blaze's guards glanced at the sky and stopped in confusion. Without waiting for his companion to urge him, he looked up at the sky, his pupils widened, and he exclaimed in disbelief. It's not good. Something fell from the sky. Protect Lord Blaze. Nani. The guards, including Blaze, all looked up at the sky at the same time, only to see a huge meteorite falling from the sky and hitting them quickly. Quick, protect me, useless trash, take me away. Blaze looked at the things in the sky, his legs went weak, and the urge to urinate suddenly came out uncontrollably. The guards were in a hurry, carrying Blaze and running outside the range of the meteorite. Air, who was thousands of meters above the ground, looked at the chaotic Holy Land and smiled ferociously. Idiots, enjoy my gift. Boom, boom, boom. Under his control, hundreds of meteorites of different sizes roared and fell downwards. No one expected that the Holy Land would be attacked so violently, and several celestial dragons were smashed into pieces by meteorites. At this moment, a large number of CP figures appeared in the Holy Land, and they used various techniques to intercept all these meteorites. A CPO team leader looked at the sky and solemnly ordered to his subordinates. This should be a man-made attack. Quickly gather people and take the celestial dragons to a safe place first. The subordinate nodded, turned around and left with his sword. The squad leader looked at the gloomy sky with a solemn expression. This is a symbol of the government and I will never allow it to be destroyed again. It's a pity that he has this heart but does not have the strength to match it. As the next wave of attacks approached, the team leader became desperate. See, tsunami, is this God's punishment 24? In the sky, the seawater that covered the sky poured in, swallowing the entire Holy Land in an instant. Perhaps it was God's arrangement. In order to complete the deal with Air, Sengoku took Kizaru with him to the Sabayati archipelago. Aokiji, who was originally on duty at the Holy Land, was temporarily transferred back to the headquarters, so Air could successfully control the sea water to flood Mariajoy. Silly things, enjoy yourself, Lousy will always come back to take care of you. Quote. Looking down at the messy Holy Land below, Air turned around and turned into lightning and left. In the Holy Land, except for a few powerful people such as the 5 elders and the Knights of God, they avoided being drowned by the sea. Most of the remaining celestial dragons, government personnel, and slaves were drowned by the water. Asshole. It must have been done by the kid from Neferutari's family. Sengoku just called and said that this kid is a person with lion fruit ability. The bald 5 elders roared angrily. The sword-wielding 5 elders also criticized loudly, venting their anger. I have long said that the Neferutari family are hateful traitors and they should be eliminated as soon as possible, but you didn't listen. Well now, the Holy Land has suffered unprecedented destruction, with a large number of casualties. Even the celestial dragons are not immune. What do you think we should do now? Shut up. The curly-haired 5 elders scolded the quarrelsome people and said calmly. Now is not the time to quarrel. Immediately mobilize manpower to organize a rescue to ensure the safety of the Wulong people. Then think about how to explain to Lord I Am. After saying that, the 5 people couldn't help but sigh. This feeling of depression was the first time they had experienced it in their lives. Just when the government called for rescue efforts, Air returned with supplies. Newspapers were carried around the world by Newsbird. The Holy Land is destroyed. Celestial dragons suffered heavy casualties. God Slayer, destroy the dragon. This is the title of the latest world economic news, which shocked the hearts of many people. Although the government tried its best to block the news, how could such important news that the entire Holy Land was flooded be covered up? When Morgans learned the news, he was so excited that he ignored the government's threats and mobilized all his contacts to investigate the origin of the incident. He then published the incident in newspapers overnight and spread it. Ah, it's over. Is the world going to be destroyed? The Holy Land has been breached. Impossible. That is a symbol of the 800-year-old government, how could it be destroyed? Isn't the fire dragon Air a marine? How could he attack the Holy Land? This is absolutely false. Regardless of whether the people believed it or not, the news of the destruction of the Holy Land spread across the sea. When the 4 emperors of New World learned the news, they all admired this bold young man in their hearts. Similarly, the Shichibukai, who are known as government lackeys, also have different ideas about this. First of all, Shang, whose real identity is the Revolutionary Army, was of course very happy after seeing the report. He believed that the news might inspire the fighting spirit of the Revolutionary Army soldiers. After reading the news, Boa Hancock, who is known as the most beautiful woman in the world, was deeply addicted to the newspaper, under Air's handsome profile. As for the world's greatest swordsman Mihawk and Kaishia Jinbei, although they were surprised by this, they had no other ideas. Gecko Moria, known as Shichibukai's shame, was completely frightened by Air and decided to avoid this madman when he saw him in the future. But the last of the Shichibukai, Doflamingo, the original celestial dragons, is different. In addition to applauding the death of those pigs, he was also slightly worried. You must know that the two had an unpleasant phone call not long ago. Doflamingo didn't take Air seriously at first, thinking that he was just a kid with decent potential. Unexpectedly, a few days later he read the newspaper and thought, Air defeated Akainu. 2 days later I saw it, oh, he had bulldozed the Holy Land. What kind of monster and madman is this? Poor brother Ming was so frightened that he wanted to run away. After realizing that the matter could not be covered up at all, the government, which had its face stamped into the ground by Air, finally responded. Air, the fire dragon. A user with multi-fruit abilities suspected to be the phantom beast species fire dragon fruit, Logia thunder fruit, and Paramesha lion fruit. The bounty is 4 billion belly. No matter life or death. If captured alive, the government will pay 3 times the reward. In this way, this special wanted order spread throughout the sea with the dissemination of the government. The name of the fire dragon Air became known to everyone through this incident. It was already 10 days before Air saw his reward. After returning to Alabasta, Air and Vivi held a grand funeral for Cobra, and countless people from across the country voluntarily came to bid farewell to this great king. At night, after comforting the sad Vivi to sleep, Air came to the room. Looking at the news bird standing at the window, Air twitched his lips and let it in. Alabasta is at least 8,000 meters away from the sea. You can still fly up. You are quite capable. Newsbird scratched his head shyly and took out a newspaper and a phone bug from the small bag. Phone bug. Is it Morgan's? The newsbird nodded and something came to Airchin. After putting the phone bug away, Air took out a 500 belly coin and handed it to it, rubbed its little head and let it leave. Sitting back in his chair, Air spread out the newspaper and started reading. My reward, 4 billion, not bad. Are the pirates in New World rioting? The government will have another headache, it deserves it. The evil army Germa 66 appears in North Blue. The last report caught Air's attention, and he read it carefully. After understanding the situation, he closed the newspaper and started thinking. 2 years ago, when he went to Sky Island again, he accidentally discovered the drawing of the Ark's proverbs, and Air kept it out of curiosity. Now that we know the location of Germa, we can just ask Judge, who is a scientist, to help him transform it and make a perfect super battleship. As soon as he thought of it, Air called Ikarim and explained something to him before planning to leave. At this time, Ikarim stopped him and said, Your Highness Air, the crisis in Alabasta has been resolved, and the body of His Majesty Cobra has been buried. The people urgently need a new king to show them the way and lead them forward. Quote. Air first looked back at him doubtfully, and then said suddenly. In that case, let's prepare for Vivi's enthronement ceremony. Don't worry, I will definitely come back before the ceremony. After saying that, he turned to leave. Ikarim stopped him again, looked at him with bright eyes, and said seriously. Your Highness, Her Royal Highness the Princess has discussed it with us, and we agree that today's Alabasta needs a powerful king like you to stabilize people's hearts, and we want you to inherit the throne. Air was stunned when he suddenly heard this request. To be honest, he was not interested in the throne of Alabasta. He wanted to be the emperor of this world, but Ikarim said so he couldn't refuse directly. After thinking about it, Air patted his head and said, Well, you should hold a coronation ceremony for Vivi. Ikarim quickly opened his mouth to dissuade him, but Air signaled him to calm down and then continued. Let Vivi become the queen of this country first, and then announce to the people that I will marry her when she comes of age, and then become the king as her husband. This will also make the people feel at ease. What do you think? This. Ikarim was hesitant and didn't know how to answer. Air smiled and patted his shoulder, walked around him and walked straight out. That's it. The rest will be discussed when I come back. Remember to tell Vivi for me. As soon as Air walked out of the palace, he was stopped again. Looking at the children in front of him, Air helplessly spread his hands and said, What's wrong? He looked like he was going to kill someone. Hina, Ain, and Nasha crossed their chests and looked at him with dissatisfaction. Hina. After running away for 2 months, he left us behind just a few days after coming back. Hina was very angry. Ain. Isn't it because you dislike our strength that is holding you back and want to abandon us? Nasha. Air, can I go with you? Hina and Ain turned to look at Nasha, a question mark appeared on their heads, and they communicated with their eyes. What's the matter with you? Didn't we agree to question him together? Why didn't you come as planned? I just want to be with Air. The 2 women were defeated by her, so they had no choice but to surround Air in the middle and look at him fiercely, with an expression that said, Don't try it with us. If that's the case, Air smiled, stepped on the ground, and ran towards the port on the moonwalk. Catch up with me and I'll take you with me. The 3 women looked at each other and quickly chased after them. In the recruit training ground, Binz looked at the 4 people in the sky and sighed, then turned to look at his recruit and roared. Don't be lazy. Run for me. In this way, Air controlled the modified warship and flew to North Blue, while Vivi continued to operate Alabasta with the assistance of Ikarim and others. North Blue, the waters of the Kingdom of Bon. That night, Judge took his 4 children back to the castle on the snail boat. The green-haired Yongji, the 4th child of the Vinsmoke family, moved his neck and said excitedly. Ha ha ha, it's really fun. I killed 1,000 enemies today. Niji, the 2nd oldest one with blue hair, also echoed, yes, I also vented a lot. War is so interesting. HMPH, those useless trash, we can completely get rid of them tomorrow. The eldest red-haired IG said confidently. The three of them discussed war and killing unscrupulously, without putting life in their eyes at all. As the sister of the three of them, Reiju just smiled and watched their discussion without speaking. Sitting on the throne, looking at his most outstanding children, Judge proudly raised his head and said to them, "My most perfect children, you all did a great job today. After we completely defeat the kingdom of Bond tomorrow and get the employer's commission, we should go to the New World." New World, that sea area ruled by pirates. Haha, I'm really looking forward to it, it will be very interesting there. The pirate territory must be full of wars, father, I can't wait any longer. When Niji and Yongji heard that they were going to New World, they started shouting excitedly. That's right, my lovely children. Ever since the fire dragon heir caused trouble in the Holy Land, the pirates in New World have become restless, and now there is complete chaos there. This kind of chaotic place is the best stage for Germa. We can sell arms, provide employment, and earn a lot of money. And with money, we can create more armies and research stronger weapons until Germa dominates the North Blue again. Bang bang bang. As Judge's exciting speech ended, a sudden burst of applause sounded behind them. With a loud shout, IG and the others quickly turned around and looked behind them, only to see a man and three women strolling through the gate and walking toward them. That's really good, but the goal of dominating North Blue is too small. Air stood not far from them and said with a smile. Behind them, the three Hina girls looked curiously at the interior decoration of the castle. Fire Dragon Air. Judge stood up from the throne in surprise. Looking at the familiar face, a few drops of cold sweat could not help but drip from his forehead. Hey, it seems like I'm quite famous. I was recognized right away. Why, what does a big shot like you want from Germa? The judge didn't ask stupid questions like how you got in, but directly asked about the purpose of Air and others. Don't worry, I just happened to be a little interested in Germa, so I came over to take a look. While talking, Air found a chair and sat down. Judge wanted to say something else but was interrupted by IG and others on the side. Are you the God Slayer Air? You don't look very good at all. How dare you be so arrogant in front of Germa? Let's see how I teach you a lesson. After saying that, the three of them rushed forward. Etc. Judge stretched out his hand to stop him, but it was too late. Bang, bang, bang. After kicking out Conqueror's 3 kicks, the three of them flew back faster than when they came, stacked on top of each other, and embedded themselves into the wall. Is this Germa's highest masterpiece? He can't even see the gap between himself and the enemy, they are just some brainless idiots. Air sat calmly and mocked in a disdainful tone. Looking at his unconscious sons who were rolling their eyes, Judge clenched his fists angrily. But knowing the terror of the world's top powerhouse, he finally suppressed the anger in his heart, forced himself to calm down and asked. Tell me what you want, and I will satisfy you as long as it doesn't go too far. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.